Gotta go. Girl talk.
Oh, what? Okay, boom! Can't do this to me, Alex.
Pardon.
Nice. This is why we're late. Yeah,
I don't know if everyone's heard, but I'm a winner now. Mondo's a winner now after the Jeffries, and it's changed everyone immediately. Tommy Hodges has been revving his Harley during meetings. We can't get any work done. Attack Peter started to refer to himself in the third person. We can't look Hector in the eye, like no one can. So yeah, I mean, it's just the sort of thing that happens when you win big, at a prestigious awards show, and yeah, that's basically like where we're at right now.
There it is.
Shit.
That you were doing so good until that.
I was a Hollywood jerk for 2 seconds. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, the Jeffries were amazing. You guys put on such an amazing show. It was fantastic. Like, congratulations to all, you four, everyone who made videos. Like, I was like laughing out loud. It was so funny and so great. Great. Get out of the way. Love the Jeffries. It was awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. We couldn't do it without, toys like, what you guys do. Like, we couldn't do it. But hi, everyone. That was Alex Brewer, Jeffrey Award winning.
Yeah, please use the proper title now.
Yeah. I'm Ryan Doell, for anyone who's new here. And we have a very, very special guest with us. We've got Jason, the Toy Otter himself, the historian of superpowers. This guy has made a page that I frequently visit that's been around for like 20 years on Action Figure Insider about that fourth wave of superpowers. Yeah. It's funny because everyone in my like toy circle, it is a page where I say, have you ever seen this page? This is before we or even starting to YouTube. And everyone goes, oh my God, is it not the coolest thing? Does it not make you so mad?
They're not saying, is he ever going to finish it?
Yeah, right. Maybe. Is he?
Someday. Yeah.
Someday.
The update I started in 2007. That's, half completed.
Half completed. It's 2007. That is so crazy that we're slowly creeping up on, 20 years.
Well,
don't say it.
I'll say this, and I was talking to some people involved the other day about this, which is just weird. So we found the whole fourth wave stuff in 2004. And we spent months researching that before I wrote my big article and the big unveil and everything. It was really crazy because no one had seen any of that stuff. Like, it was just out of the blue that we found all that and all those pitch slides and everything. So we had to get all this back in the day. We had to get all the slides scanned, and and there were a lot. And then I had to clean them all up in Photoshop, and then we had to make all these calls and try to figure it out. And at the time, we were just thinking, like, no one's going to remember what they were working on in 1984, because we were thinking, I was 30 something, like in my early 30s. And I just thought, oh my God, these guys must be so old. Now it's been 20 years. So that was 20 years after 84 when we found this into the article. Now it's been over 20 years since the article came out. That blows my mind. And I can't remember what I was doing in 2004. So it totally validates, what we were thinking.
Right. No, it is. But it's so great to have that up there. I think the one great thing about the internet is a lot of it, well, the history, good or bad, but I mean, there's a lot of history and archives, and like whether it's comic book cover archives, or what even just artists were working on, comic artists and writers, you can always go back and see what they were working on at any point in time. And thanks to like you and even Jay from Geek Dad Life, like he had a whole page which he's taken down because it cost him too much. but he had like the real Ghostbusters archive page. Like that was him.
Yeah. And that's something. I'll get a little bit of my background. I don't know how much you guys know about how I got started and all that jazz.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Because I keep meaning to relaunch the Toy Otter site just so it's a link to the socials and everything. But I have so much old content people ask, and I wanted to, like when I do the runs of all the unproduced toys and stuff on my Instagram, I wanted to have a website just to archive that or all the superpowers, because Instagram is such a pain to scroll backwards through more than, a little bit. But it's incredibly expensive now just to put up a basic website, and all the hosts are crooked, and it's a giant pain and everything else. But going back to it, I started in college in the 90s. I got online by accident in the early 90s and had just started collecting toys in college. I didn't collect I stopped collecting toys like when I was 11 or 12 or whatever, and then when I was in my 20s, a buddy found a Green Arrow at a flea market. And we had read comics, through high school and everything. And I kind of followed him a little bit in college. And he just came and found me. And he was just all super excited because we had no idea they had made a Green Arrow action figure.
Oh, wow.
Superpowers. Because Superpowers came out when I was in high school, and I just, wasn't even looking at the toys.
Yeah.
Right.
And then ironically, I worked at a Toys R Us like in 89 and 90, but I wasn't collecting toys, which is a shame because I'd kill to go back and look at those aisles and everything again. But yeah, he found that they had made a Green Arrow figure. I think it was about a year after Batman came out. The movie came out.
Yeah.
And so we just started haunting flea markets and garage sales and everything, because you could get everything super cheap in the early 90s. And behind me is all the Star Wars figures. We ended up putting together like a full set of Star Wars, full set of Superpowers, Secret Wars, all that kind of stuff. But it took forever just to figure out what had gotten made. This was before Tomarts magazine, before Wizard. There were no resources, so it just finding stuff like a cyclotron, we were just puzzled. It was just like, what the hell is this? Was it even superpowers? Yeah. So when I got online, the first thing I thought about was I need to make a superpowers archive, because it was just so everyone has this information, because there was nothing out there.
And what year was this about?
95-ish.
95.
So, and then in 96, I'll do a shout out to Jason Liebig, who's still online collecting candy. If you find him on Instagram, he was an editor at Marvel at the time, but he had been a assistant editor or an intern or something at DC. And he got a cast of Man-Bat. And he wrote me and said, I have a Superpowers figure you don't have in your archive. It's of Man-Bat. And I was like, man, I didn't even hear about Man-Bat. So he mailed me photos of the prototype, and I put the first photos up there. That was my first big scoop. And that, brought tons of attention. And then other people started sending me stuff. And then I partnered with Eric Myers. We started Raving Toy Maniac. So that was really big in the 90s. We were I think the first website to do panels at Comic-Con. And we went out and covered it. We were the first website to get press credentials for Toy Fair.
Yes.
Because that was a nightmare, because they didn't believe internet was press. That was 96, I think.
Wow.
I remember desperately scouring your Toy Fair picture posts. That was like the only way that anyone could see that stuff, right?
What's sad is all that stuff is gone. Like I threw away all the photos. Like I just had, because we had to take photos.
Put them back up.
No, I mean like the physical photos I threw away.
Oh wow.
Like at some point, because I thought in the early 2000s, they were just taking up space. I had like all these shoe boxes full of photos, because we took hundreds and hundreds of photos and then had to scan them. So it took forever to get them developed, then had to scan them. And we would go in like New York, we would find whatever was scoops, we would find a 1 hour photo place and just get developed, because it was so expensive, the shots that we could get online immediately. And at one point, the owner of Tomarts gave us a really nasty phone call saying we were taking the food out of his kid's mouth because because they would stretch out Toy Fair like 3 or 4 issues over months because there's no other way to get that information, and we were putting it up like within hours of leaving a showroom.
Right.
And now everybody reports it immediately from the showroom. It's crazy.
Oh, they're doing it live. You can watch every YouTuber give blurry motion blur videos live from Comic-Con.
Not to mention that just like every day there's more toy news out in the world over the internet,
And that's the thing, is at a certain point they had to, the toy companies, it took them a very long time to realize, if we just have this 1 or 2 press events a year, we're having the rest of the year is just a news desert. Like, we can't drum up stuff. So it became, we're going to just trickle out this stuff. And now we're going to have our own live streams. And now we're going to have, first it was like all the different outlets get exclusives. And it was just to keep the interest going.
Right.
But yeah.
That is wild.
So
that's quite the history.
It did all that, but I gotta mention too, after Raving Toy Maniac, I started Action Figure Insider with my partner Daniel Pickett, who basically, I'm still on the masthead and stuff, but he's run it for like the last decade. Once my job got crazy and I couldn't spend that much time on it, he does everything, him and his wife Abby. So, but I still
props to
pop
them
in occasionally, and they still host all my stuff.
Thank God.
Yeah.
So that's that's why it stayed online, because Raving Toy Maniac, like all of our original content most of it isn't there anymore, and I didn't keep a lot of backups, but it's just like the photos, there's stuff you just wish you kept. And we had a forum that was huge at one point, a lot of industry people and everything, but it was written in, I don't know if it was even PHP, but every night you had to like cull the bottom posts, because if there were too many posts after a day, it would break the forum. So literally you were manually just deleting everything from the previous day. At the end of the day, it's like Lost. It's pressing the button all the time to reset or everything breaks. And
was this like medieval times? Like, did people carry swords around with them?
It's weird. It took so long for, even when I want to say bulletin boards, what was the next thing before social media? Like when everyone got kind of the Ain't It Cool forums, when that became the thing, the structured forums with topics.
Yes.
That took them a very long time to switch over. But there was something about this, there was just an immediacy to being able to post, and you could post anonymously, like everybody just had code names, and I'm still friends with a lot of people that were doing all that in the 90s and the early 2000s. So
yeah, forums were a big thing, and just like social media, I feel like forums helped kind of not divide, but I would segregate seems like the wrong word too. It's almost like you could be specific. So if you had specific interests, you could have a forum and start a community of people who shared those same niche specific interests.
Yeah.
And I feel like
you really had to, that's when moderators really had to work and moderate, because if you didn't, it would devolve. Like you had to constantly police in a good way, to foster the community. But there were some, I guess that's what Reddit's become. That kind of took over that space for that kind of thing. And then social media kind of killed everything else. I don't know anything that still has like forums ongoing. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but.
I feel like
I mean, there's like the Foosh forum and Collector Freaks, and
Foosh is still the forum's still going.
Yeah.
I gotta say, and that a lot of those guys started out of the Raving Toy Maniac thing. I've known Paul for a long time. I still talk to a bunch of those guys. But it's funny. I haven't been to any websites. Like I don't go to websites anymore. I just hang out on
Yeah.
social media.
I guess this counts as social media, but I feel like it's become the new forum, and people are kind of leaving Facebook groups for Discord.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right, and we're seeing that a lot more too. And but again, I like Discord. I mean, we have one for Geek Dad Life, we have one for Yes Have Some for the Patreons, and it's nice because you set up the channels, as they
Mhm.
call it, and you can now everyone can kind of talk about their favorite things and be more specific without it getting lost in a Facebook group of like everyone's posts and everything kind of leaving. So I'm all for Discord. I think that's the way to go.
It's I use it, and before I get attacked by everyone, I'll explain. I use it for AI stuff.
What?
I know, because so I work for a big ad agency.
Okay.
And trust me that corporate America is doing everything they can to figure out AI.
Yeah, I bet.
So it's been my mandate for a while that my team we're trying to be the internal experts on a lot of these platforms, and we have so much work, we're failing badly, but I'm staying aware of it, and you have to use, Discord to run a lot of these things. Nothing makes me feel older now than diving into new technologies like this, because I feel like this is something 20-year-old me would have been far, far ahead of the curve.
Right.
And 50-something-year-old me is just every day shaking my head and shaking my fist at the screen and trying to figure out what the hell everything means.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I'm trying to figure out a way to make it, because again, my job is a lot of scheduling and note taking, and not trying to. It's more like it's not about like it replacing my job. It's about making it more accurate
Well,
to what's the accuracy of it.
And I tell my guys, like my guys are all, video guys, animators, 3D guys. And it's like, it may or may not replace your job, but if you don't become super proficient at it, someone else is going to take your job.
Right.
Like that's the reality. And that's what I tell everybody, even if you're super against it. And it's the time to fight it was 5 years ago. Like, if you just look at the climate we're in and the government we're in and everything, it's coming.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, it's coming. And use it as a tool. The best artists are going to end up being like artisans. They're going to have patrons. You know what I mean? Like the wealthy will still hire artists to do stuff. But as far as like commercial stuff and commodities, it's going to take over just untold industries.
Right. And that's kind of my kind of thought process on that too. And I kind of, because when I say like, hey, we should just have our AI take our notes, but we still have to go through those notes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anyone's ever worked with a client, when they talk, they just talk about things very loosey-goosey, no context, no real detail. That's up to you, the note taker, to put that in there. So even if you got AI writing everything verbatim, you still have to be like, if they say that thing on the left needs to change, you got to change that thing to that specific thing.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, don't worry about it. Like, like you still have to go through and do all that, but it's now more of an editing process, than an actual, like, sit there and type everything.
Right. There's something, I should have sent you these pictures. I did as a test. So I don't want to say this out loud, but what the heck, I'm going to. So there's a Chinese AI that's running on GitHub that you can drop any image into and it gives you an STL back that is unbelievable in terms of it does it completely 360 from one image, because it extrapolates all the details, and it doesn't have a lot of detail to it, but anything you might be scanning in 3D right now, it's not that much worse than that quality, and it's basically brand new. I mean, within 6 months, I would say at least the view it's seeing will be as good as a scan.
Right. That's
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
God.
what I said. I did. And I did a lot of tests. I dropped like photos onto it of like people. I did action figures. I did flat cartoon art. Like it took like Bruce Timm type stuff and absolutely gave you the reverse image. Like did Batman's cape all scalloped, figured all of that out, the back of the head, everything. And I was just like, how is it doing this? Because the AI, the model has been trained on so many things, it knows what the back of a head looks like. So as soon as it can say, this is a person, I already have the proportions from this image, you know, that kind of stuff. I can extrapolate what this is. I know what a cape looks like. You know, probably has thousands of images of Batman in there. So
and I
it's
think that's
crazy.
I think that's where AI is the total bummer for me, is because it's just going to scrape what's already been created. And there's not going to be a lot of new innovation or that new like breakout style artist or like a Bruce Timm, like, or maybe a Jim Lee or a Babs Tarr, you know,
there
somebody's got
are,
that distinct...
because people are still going to do this on their own. They're not going to get hired to do it.
That's even worse.
What you're going to see, and this is to get on the soapbox for a second. I didn't mean to talk about AI, but we're here.
Okay.
So I gave a big presentation a few years ago to people in my company when this started hitting, and you could see this was a big wave. And if you don't ride the wave, you're going to get crushed by the wave. One of the things I tried to tell them, because a lot of the talk at the time was, well, this is like the digital revolution in the 90s, and no one lost their job when Photoshop came.
Right.
Which is not true, because I worked with a lot of 70s and 80s comic artists. And in the 90s, they were no longer in the industry. They were working on other stuff because Image came and swept them out the door, and then Photoshop and all that stuff came and, you know, pushed them further. Even if they got proficient at it, people didn't like their style. But what I use as an example is just think of movie posters. So in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, most big companies, corporations had art departments in the company. You watch Mad Men, you see a lot of this. There was a lot of hands-on, even if it was internal stuff. They were doing layouts, they were doing designs, they would do hundreds of layouts. Then they would, you know, kind of narrow it down. And then you would get these painted pieces. And then you get all the collateral that went with the painted pieces. So the 90s come and Photoshop and all this comes around. Well, they're not going to replace all these art departments right away, but what they will do is start putting the collateral of websites, maybe some newspapers, and definitely DVD covers, these new media, give it to the interns who have Photoshop, and they're just going to clip out some collages together to get someone's attention on the shelf. And what they found was, hey, sales weren't impacted at all. Let's start putting these people on the posters. And go back and look at movie posters from the mid to late 90s, and you're going to see all these kind of collages. You're going to see all these generated backgrounds. You're going to see all these like outer glows and lens flares and bevels, drop shadows.
You're making me think of the Independence Day poster. That's what's
I had a series of James Bond posters, and you can really see where it goes from these great Robert McGinnis paintings and everything, and then you start getting into more graphic design, and then all of a sudden you get to the 90s, and it's literally these Pierce Brosnan things are just horrific because
like
it's
3 heads and an explosion.
Yeah, and it's just like it's a lack of design almost. And it's that Photoshop thing. And what the studios found and what people found, you can do it with product packaging. Go look at all the care that went into cereal boxes or packaging. And you get to the 90s and the early 2000s, and it's just gradients and drop shadows and everything going crazy. And what they found was, hey, we don't lose sales at all. We didn't lose any tickets, and we don't have to have this art department now.
Right. But you definitely, it's funny you bring up James Bond, because the moment you said like the whole clip art and collage thing, it had me go from the original trilogy posters, which had that, but they were, they were the Drew Struzans and the there's another artist that was painting him too, and now it's on the tip of my tongue.
Are you talking about the original trilogy?
The original trilogy, right? I think Drew Struzan was later.
Like
was
Charles White did one with Drew Struzan, and you had Tom's British, the guy that did the
Right. Yeah.
big
Yes.
one, and Howard Chaykin did one, and yeah,
and
you
it
had
was
a lot
great.
of
You had
different-
all these, you had all these wonderful artists doing these beautiful artwork. But it's funny, like the prequels came out, that's we started kind of getting the clip art a little bit, but they were also doing like painted ones on the side, which was great. And then you had and some of them were just photos as well. I feel like the episode 1 teaser poster with Anakin walking with the Darth Vader shadow, which is still to me awesome, but it is what it is. Yeah. Right.
Even the strews and stuff, and it's funny because he was so big. You look at his work and you look at his late 70s stuff, you look at his 80s stuff, and thank you, Tom Jung. Yeah. Tom Jung and Hildebrandt, they basically did the same poster. That's the one with Luke doing this and Leia there. Is the Hildebrandts repainted it for some reason. I don't remember why. Lucas just didn't like something about it, so they repainted almost the same thing.
That's so weird. Okay.
So so you can just look at those side by side. But if you look at Strews and stuff, once he started doing the face collages in the probably around the mid 90s, like Hook, I think, was one of the first ones where you have that. Actually, probably Temple of Doom. Now that I'm thinking about it, might be the first one. He had like the big head and all the little heads around it and stuff.
Oh,
he started doing that as most of the designs, and he has a great I don't know if it's Facebook or Instagram, but he has a great social media thing where he's always showing his sketches and all his layouts and just really inventive stuff. And then they start becoming all of that for some reason. And then the prequels, I felt like, were the pinnacle of here's a bunch of heads,
right?
You know,
or special editions, same thing.
Yeah, well, that's it. Actually, special editions was the one where it just cemented, and then Lucas probably said, "Yes, I love that kind of triptych thing. Let's do the exact same thing for the prequels." And they're all based off photo reference, you know, with some of the stuff drawn in. But all those people doing Photoshop then looked at those and said, "Oh yeah, I can do this." And then you just started getting that for all the posters. It's crazy.
Yes.
But I feel like that was a bigger influence than anything on where that kind of stuff went. And now, you know, it's rare to get like a knockout poster for a movie.
I agree. I can't even, like, I think outside of, like, I'm gonna toot my own horn here. I think outside of like the Spider-Verse posters, but I think that's an animation thing though too, because I don't think people realize how we make posters for animated movies. We actually we have the actual animators doing it and posing the characters.
Yeah.
And like, here's the idea. Someone kind of sketches it out, and then the animators recreate that in a still frame with the rigs and the models. And then it goes through lighting, it goes through comp, and then we make a poster, get through the graphics thing, and that's how we make posters. Right. And I think that to me is the closest we've gotten to like almost old school style posters, because you've got the artist still working on them.
Yeah.
But
it's not driven by the movie stars, right? It's like part of what's, I think, motivating just to have close-ups with a suggestion of the world of the movie is that it's like, well, what's going to get people to click on this movie is seeing a recognizable movie star's picture as big as possible. Whereas like animated characters, it's like you have much more free reign, because like, you know, people aren't going to see Miles Morales isn't a real person.
Well, and you think back too, if you guys look at any of the old Star Wars stuff, it is incredible. Old movies did this in general, but Lucas really did it on the original trilogy. There's photo reference of everything. It is a crazy amount of stuff. He had the stars pose and just show up. And you can tell too by like haircuts and stuff. This is like months and months after filming, where they just put on the costumes again and just did like tons of photo reference. One of the cool things when I was working on Star Wars was they send us all these discs of the library. And it had so much. This is like 97, 98, and it had so much OT stuff I had never seen, and I had read probably everything published at that point. I was huge Star Wars, and it was just crazy. It was crazy how much, and even to this day, I haven't seen a lot of those pictures show up.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
And it was
cool.
What are
everywhere.
what are they hoarding them for? I mean,
Well, they
enough
charge you.
time's gone by.
All
What's
I
that?
could see were these little catalog pictures on a Kodak photo disc, which I don't even think anything reads them nowadays. But they charge you for every photo.
That's well,
Well.
like
If you want to use the photos. So
welcome to corporate America, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
pick wisely. Something else Lucas was a pioneer in. He very much saw that everything could be monetized.
Yeah, that's true. He was ahead of the game in that for sure.
Man, when does Star Wars become public domain? We gotta wait that long?
Yeah,
gotta wait a long
we'll be long gone out. I'm so sorry. Hang on. One quick thing. We did not do this at the beginning of the show. We got so wrapped up in the history of Jason, and then we got into a whole AI thing. All right, let's say a quick hello to the chat. And we'll make it very, very quick. So thank you everyone for being here. We'll start from the bottom. So you're gonna probably see things like, oh God, please no. Video Power Gaming is here. I'm not gonna put that one up, Davey Sock Rocker. You're not no. Thunderhausen is here. King Panther is here. Mr. Doell and Alex off topic. I need to say this. Alex, congratulations on your Rogue winning figure for 2024.
Thank you.
And unless something changes, it's going to be Venom winning 2025. Oh, it's probably going to be a few Alex Brewer specials in 2025 getting nominated. Shondo Gecko is here. Okay. MGMCU is here. Derek Hoover. Davey Sockrocker. This one I can do. Monsters from Beyond. This is Ian J. Everyone follow him. He is a concept artist for Marvel. If you've been paying attention to him in the chat, yes, he's very much against AI, and also for very good reason as well. I'm with you. There's a lot to process in all of this. Tony Johnson is here. Quip is here. Everyone drop a year for Quip. Zach is here as well. Please be sure to follow him on Instagram. Amazing stuff. Beautiful wrestling artwork as well. Great stuff. Dorlaxian is here. Dorlaxian is here. I should say that properly. I just slurred that. Justin Mohan is here. Dave Andrews Gatey's Toys. Huge fan of yours. I don't know if you've been watching him at all, Jason. His channel, he goes through a lot of like superpowers history and stuff. Talks about like a lot of toy history in the sense of like, who didn't we get and how straight male chauvinistic pigs did not give us the toys that we needed to complete our collections. Yeah. Amazing stuff. I think I phrased that correctly. My benefactor and one of my most favorite people, Mr. Matt Bush. Yes, movie posters, just floating heads of actors now. You are correct. Absolutely correct. Deep Space Niner is here. Yeah.
Wait till you guys see AB. That's get ready for that one.
Oh, dude. We've been watching for a long time. The AB process of art has been absolutely phenomenal.
Mostly AB at this point.
That's right. Topher Khan is here. And everyone's chatting and chilling, and this is absolutely great. I think I saw Allison here at some point as well. And Blake, Toy Collector Magazine, amazing. Everyone go subscribe to the magazine right now.
He's not wrong.
Oh, and my boy, Bionic Funk, the Professor of Ricketts and the Duke Booty. Derek, thank you for being here. Awesome. Cool. Oh, look at this. Kayla. Just jumping in out of nowhere. This is great. And yes, please hit that like button. Detroit Dave is here. Sorry, I just want to make sure everyone's getting their shout outs because it's really nice that everybody's here, right? Chris Bruno. And Johnny Disco's here as well. And the rest. Okay, Johnny Disco says and the rest, so that means it's time. That's where we're ending it. Awesome. Okay, let's get into the superpowers talk. Jason, you have been taking I would say us DC collectors particularly and comic book collectors by storm with all these renders that you've been putting out. So much to the point that I believe let me know which one happened first. Did DC find you to make these covers? Or like after the fact? Or is this something that you kind of pitched to them? How did this happen?
Okay, so before we get into that, I'm gonna throw a couple of plugs up front so I don't forget.
Absolutely. Yes.
I know a lot of people are always asking me about Longbox Heroes, if there's going to be any more, what's happening. we've teased it. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We're very close to launching the Kickstarter for Wave 2. Everything is set up. Everything's quoted at the factory. We just have to cross the T's and dot the I's. You can get the first look at them, I think, I don't know if it's hit yet, but the upcoming Toy Collector issue. Shout out to Blake again.
Nice.
And then we should launch very soon, and we'll jump on these things and talk more about it. Hopefully everybody likes what we were able to put together. And hopefully we're trying Kickstarter because we want to see how that compares to the pre-order system we had before and get the word out more. I think a lot of people after the fact were very much like, I didn't hear about it. How can I find these? And we made such low quantities that because we can't have backstock, everything's made to order. So we're hoping Kickstarter as a platform just gets the word out more. It's going to be basically the same cost, and we're going to have all these different tiers and stuff. So that's that. I thought there was one other thing to shout out. Oh, speaking of Blake, and speaking of the Superpowers Archive, I've been working on the end-all be-all Superpowers article for Blake for Toy Collector in the midst of all the other stuff I'm working on. So at some point, if you saw like one of the first issues, I did a big Secret Wars thing that was like the end-all be-all of Secret Wars. So the Superpowers one will have stuff that I don't think has ever been reported, and that will segue into the covers. So my relationship with DC happened because I have a certain reputation, Superpowers guy.
Yeah.
To say the least.
To say the
they
least.
were doing the Kirby omnibus, and that I just gotta say right there, that I didn't even know was gonna happen, and that is the coolest thing. To me, that's almost cooler than the covers that they did an ad in the comics.
It's almost like an end cap from the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. That was super cool. So until I got an issue, I had no idea that was going to happen. I know a lot of people in all sorts of industries and entertainment and all that from everything over the years. And DC had reached out to some people about what can you tell me about this certain stuff for the Jack Kirby Omnibus Volume 2 they were starting to work on. And they said, well, you need to talk to Jason Geyer. So I got a call from Alex Gaylor, my editor, an amazing guy, amazing editor. I got to give every prop and shout out to him. Because in general, I'm old and curmudgeonly, and my first thought when someone proposes something is, we'll never be allowed to do that. So the people who come and say, like, let's do this crazy thing, I'm always, in awe of that haven't been beaten down by life yet. So, and then I just go along with it. So yeah, Alex and I got together, and we were definitely on the same page. And I think it was going to be just a small little section in the back of Kirby helped out with Superpowers, and we were able to really make a robust appendix for that. And we found out a bunch of stuff. I interviewed some Kenner people. We got to work with the Kirby Museum, and we found a lot of artwork that people had thought were part of Jack's animation art because they're not labeled. They didn't know what they were, but they were Superpowers concepts. So if you get the omnibus, you can see a bunch of stuff that isn't out there.
I did not know that was in there.
Yeah, and one of the things, and so I got to write a really long thing, and we got all the artwork together and all this stuff, and Blake gave us some pieces, and it's really cool. And it was cool because my name's on the back cover, like I didn't expect them to do that, and everything. So that was really cool, just putting that together. And what's cool about that is I also did the appendixes way back when, mid-2000s, for Marvel for the Secret Wars omnibus. So if you look, I did the appendix and all the toy lines for that. So it's just kind of fun to have a bookend of now I was both in Marvel and DC's big end-all be-all. And that's also where I interviewed Alex Saviak for the Kirby thing, because he had done a bunch of mini comics. Trying to find the credits on stuff like the mini comics is murder, because so how that worked was there were a lot of people like Alex who hung around the bullpen or just were around and picked up jobs as they came in. And stuff like superpowers was just kind of like an extra paycheck for a lot of these artists. So literally, Paul Levitz or I'm blanking at his name, but the editor in charge of the special projects would just get the call saying, we need these things for Kenner. And he would be like, who wants to take it? You know, or give someone a call and say like, hey, are you busy right now? Would you like to do this little mini comic? I think Ernie Chan did a bunch of these, and that was it. They would just get them and send off the pages, and Kenner handled the printing, and they took care of it and everything. So unless you find original artwork out there with a signature on it, it's who knows who worked on it, you know?
Right. Because even all the styles for all the mini comics are all very similar.
They're all very similar because part of it was they picked the guys who had kind of a house style.
Right.
You know, and Kenner picked up stuff from Garcia Lopez where they could. And as who just put that in the chat, Thunderhouse Design, Dick Giordano, the previous editor-in-chief, who was still a prolific inker at DC, inked almost everything involved with that. And he drew a lot. So you look at who's who, you look at the style guide stuff. Everyone always is Garcia Lopez is a god. Don't get me wrong. I watched you guys go through the book. I've got mine right here.
What, this book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something we'll talk about that in a second, because I talked a bunch with Ryan. I think I was sending you a bunch of notes offline, but
you were, yes.
When I got it, it drove me absolutely nuts. This should have been like the ultimate version, and it's this weird Frankenstein version from multiple, iterations of that style guide. I wish they just had an appendix or something, and I don't even know if the people who put it together realized they were just pulling from all these different style guides. Anyway, sorry, my train of thought's all over the place. But so Giordano, I think, deserves a lot of the credit for that stuff, for everything being consistent. Even when they brought in an Alex or whatever, he was still doing a lot of the inking. He probably inked a bunch of the mini comics. So it all looks, a lot of that, if you look at his work, a lot of that has the feeling of his style as well as Garcia Lopez. So anyway, I talked to everybody and we put that together. And the big thing we found out was that, everybody, including me, and again, my archive, I want to update it and I want to get the article for Blake, because there's a lot of stuff that I had was conjecture or misinformation that has since been corrected, but I put it out there and now everybody talks about it.
Yeah.
And Tomart Magazine just made stuff up. Flat out. They had great pictures, but a lot of the information, if you were in the industry, you could see it. They were just making leaps but presenting everything they ever wrote as fact. So it was infuriating.
That's what Twitter is today.
That's what Twitter is today. I mean, but that was it. They were the only game in town, and there was, if Tom Tumbush knew a lot, like there's no doubt he was well connected, knew a lot of stuff. But if he didn't know it, he just kind of made it up, I guess. But just outright falsehoods that he knew better were printed in that magazine.
Wow.
I think Andrew's bringing it up here. You called out the sort of the myth of the Catwoman.
So that was a big thing. Someone brought me in 96, again, someone brought me pictures of this Catwoman prototype. And I knew someone who knew David Mazzucchelli. Like, they asked point blank, because DC compensated people for design work. It's like George Perez for the thing, or Ed Hannigan for the Brainiac redesign, or Jack Kirby for the stuff he did. So Mazzucchelli is the one who came up with Catwoman's redesign for Batman Year One. And he was like, no, that's nothing. Has nothing to do with that. And his first sketches came out in 86. And that Catwoman, everyone's like, well, it would have been an 87 figure. I was like, but they were designing 87 figures in 85. Alex knows what the timeline is like for stuff.
Right.
Like, that was way back when they would have needed that. And that wasn't even an idea at that point. So it was pretty definitively debunked in 96. And yet Tomarts and everything still just want to call it a Superpowers prototype. It's not. It's Batman Returns. You know,
Right.
They didn't have movie artwork. It's why the Penguin didn't get done either. You know,
Well,
so
and I feel like there's like when it was like Annette Bening or like she was like in the lead, they made like casts that looked much more like
yeah. Did you see that
year
Iron Man
one.
Studios mask, which is just crazy how different the mask is, and I think the costume's the same.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was, and again, Bruce Timm says this in interviews, they could go to the set, they could do sketches, but they weren't allowed to take photos. They weren't given any reference. So Kenner was just like, we don't have time for this. And they had Robin, who's straight from the comic, Batman, that was just a redo of Batman 89. Penguin was just Superpowers Penguin. And Catwoman was going to be the comic Catwoman, like comic Robin. And apparently Michelle Pfeiffer's performance was getting such buzz. Kenner made the decision, everything's coming out in the summer for this movie. We're going to hold off Catwoman until the holidays, and we're going to redo her. And so,
okay,
they sculpted her
some holes here.
Yeah, they sculpted her like that, and then there's a secondary prototype. It's on my Instagram page actually, where I did a post. It's a secondary prototype, which is almost like the movie Catwoman. It's between the two. It's the smooth costume, but she's posed now. And then they took the posed one and put all the stitches in it and everything. And that became the movie figure. But it's very obviously, you can see that we have a stages of this exact figure. It wasn't going to be Superpowers. And it's the same sculptors. The guys who sculpted Superpowers worked at Kenner/Hasbro into the 2010s. We're still sculpting Star Wars and stuff. Like, it's their style. Of course, it's going to look similar.
Yeah.
Right.
So, anyway, the going back to the Jack Kirby thing, the big takeaway was Cyclotron and all those guys that everyone blamed Kenner for over the years were actually all Kirby work. So Kenner would come up with ideas and sketches based on the engineering, the mechanisms that they couldn't. It's really weird. They'd be like, well, we can't fit this with a DC character. So they would say, make one up. And then DC would get the Kenner ideas and they'd send them to Jack Kirby. And Jack Kirby redrew Cyclotron and Rocket Man and all of these things. And so they're all a combination of Kenner ideas with Jack Kirby designs.
So it would be like Kenner would be like, we want a guy who can like take his like head and chest off and reveal a robot underneath, and then it was to Kirby to kind of interpret that. It was just like you see the sketches. They would do full sketches of the character, and Kirby would get them and just basically draw over them and just say, okay.
No. This is good design.
Because Cyclotron does have a very kind of like OMAC era Kirby feel to it.
Oh, yeah. All of this, if you look at it, there's a lot of big Kirby design cues in these characters. Yeah. And just like that Orion, no one touched it. They just had Kirby redesign it like he did Parademon and everything else. And everyone always was like, why didn't we get a Kirby Orion? And it's like, that is a Kirby Orion.
You did.
It's exactly like his drawings look exactly like the finished figure. So,
man, now some of these are making so much more sense. Like even now, Cyclotron. Now that you say Kirby, now that's all I see.
Yeah,
right.
Very much Kirby parts to this. And Cyclotron to me always looked like Wonder Man, which again Kirby designed on Marvel. Like he's got a lot of that kind of Wonder Man.
The glasses come together. The glasses. Yeah.
I mean, like that, you look at that first Avengers Wonder Man in the green and everything. It's the kind of lines going off from the head and the,
Yeah.
So, so anyway, I did all that for the omnibus. Had a great relationship. A lot of laughs. And then like, I don't know, a little while, I don't think it was before the omnibus came out. I had we'd done Longbox Heroes by that point, and I was doing all of my fake Instagram figures. And Alex, my editor, just called me one day and he said, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but I proposed in a meeting, why don't we just do Superpowers variant covers and I bet Jason will go along with it. And that was it. I was like, heck yeah, I'm in.
Amazing.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Let's look at a few of them.
So yeah, so there's the original ones. And I don't have any say in what characters are chosen because sales. So sales is picking the books they want variant covers on.
Mm-hmm.
So where I have leeway in is what versions we're doing.
So shirtless Neil Adams Batman.
That's
all you.
Alex. That's
Alex. Really? Oh, okay.
All the rest are me. And that one, Alex just said it would be cool because we have to have a Batman. It would be cool if we do that, Ra's al Ghul, however you want to say it, version. I was like, heck yeah. And then it became a big nipples or no nipples. We went back and forth a little bit on that. They give me tons of leeway. Like everything you see, obviously I just recreated the cards, no big deal. Amazingly, they let me do the price sticker with my logo on it, which I didn't think they were going to let me get away with.
Well, that's kind of your signature. Would it right? Like
that, and I think that's how everyone sees it, is because I'm not signing these. And that's why I put in the legal line at the bottom, I put mine and Alex's name, because I did feel bad that because I am a graphic design guy, and that used to be my job for a long time. I wanted these to be as close to the covers, the real covers, as possible. So they didn't have signatures. I didn't want signatures on this, but I'll put credits on them, where I can.
Right. No, that was a good choice.
Yeah. And you can see back, where is it? Back here. Alex.
Oh, yeah.
Alex sent me the original line art of that Superman as a thank you.
Oh, cool.
So that was really cool. That was a surprise. I just got that one day, and he DC bought it from Saviak to give to me. So that was really nice.
I'm gonna embiggen you. And there it is. There it is. There. I can point to my screen, but it's just,
oh yeah. So
where
is my? There we go.
There it is. Weird. Right, he made him kind of look like Colonel Sanders in like a Santa hat.
Oh yeah. That's well, I mean that was the original direction we were going in.
It's bold.
Also, kudos to you for having that record.
I have been looking for a copy of Colonel Sanders' Tijuana Picnic forever. So that would be the other
as one does.
And there's a Disney. That's a Disney record I had as a kid that I got another copy on eBay that you got it at Gulf gas stations for $1 in the 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but DC lets me do pretty much anything I want, and if they think I go too far, they just say maybe not. But like I write all those word balloons, and I just make them as goofy as I can, and
they're great.
Yeah, and I give Alex loose direction for the line art, and then a couple of them sometimes they don't quite fit in the space. Like I made him kind of a template to just draw over to see where they would fit. And then sometimes it'll be like, I think the first Nightwing looked really angry, so we had him look a little because I had sculpted him with a smirk. I wanted Dick Grayson to feel lighter than some of the dour characters. So we wanted the art to reflect that. Batman's pose changed. I think he was doing something else. The newest round had a couple that got redrawn pretty heavily because they just didn't work with the rest of them. A big thing is me being, I don't want to say mean, but just trying to be like, Alex, draw like you did in the 1980s,
Right.
Like very much like try to retro your style, which is tough to for anybody to do.
I imagine that would be pretty hard.
Yeah. So, and he does an amazing job. Like these are just wonderful. So we're really happy. And Alex has like Green Lantern throwing his mask away because I sculpted the two heads, and my editor and I, there's two Alexes. There's an Alex here, there's Alex the editor, Alex the artist. A lot of Alexes in conversations, but we were going back and forth on which head to have. And ultimately it was just like, can we just include an extra head, even though superpowers didn't do that? And I liked it because some of the superpowers had that little blue arrow call out on the sides of packages. So I just thought that was a fun way to hit another element of the package design. But Alex is the one who I think drew him throwing the mask, and I was like, that's great.
Yeah, that's fun.
And it's really good.
And for anyone who doesn't know, these are renders of full 3D sculpts that you've done.
And the entire package is a render because I wanted to get real shadows and everything. I really wanted, like, I forced myself to figure out how to do that clear bubble, which I had never really done transparent things. I'd done translucence plastics. So I forced myself to figure out the lighting and everything. So it's really in that bubble when I render it. It really has that card back on it. And it's a really long high-res render, which sucks when they come back with copy changes or something because I have to re-render the whole damn thing again.
How long does something like that render then?
6 to 7 hours.
Okay.
These are like, I make them almost, they're probably poster size.
Wow.
Because then I'm shrinking them down for print mechanicals. So I set up all the mechanicals for the printing, everything. Because again, that's what I used to do, and then I can control it all. What am I using to render? I am rendering in Substance Stager.
Okay.
Because I cannot figure out Blender for the life of me. That is still on my to-do list. But I sculpt in ZBrush. I use Substance Painter and Photoshop to do all of the painting and coloring. I almost never color in ZBrush for some reason. I know a lot of people do that.
It's fun. You might want to take a walk on the wild side.
I know. I've done it. I did it. Like, I think my Lobo sculpt, I had to do it because I couldn't figure out what his feature. I kept messing up his features, and so I had to paint him in ZBrush so I could get a better grasp on.
It definitely helps sculpting to have the paint to see what it looks like with all the landmarks, filled in, right?
It does, and as an aside, my sculpts, I'll have to show you my sculpt sometime, because I'm trying to sculpt things like it looked like someone sculpted them in the 70s and 80s out of wax.
Yeah.
So
good
I
point.
very much like, if you were to hire me, my stuff would not be all like super defined and crisp. And you know what I mean? Like the kind of sculpts you see coming out of Hasbro and everything. Partly because I want a different aesthetic. Like, I'm trying for a different aesthetic. But also you're very fast, Alex. I've seen some of your live demos. But I'm very fast. I'm very OCD. I have like 30 projects going on at a time. The dirty secret for a lot of these is I don't even sculpt the backs. Like, I'm doing, like, when you see my Instagram posts, I'm usually doing one of those a night, and that's full sculpt, render, color, whatever collateral, and just getting the post up so I can keep moving.
Yeah.
In addition to my work.
I know that any of the Batman Christmas posts that you've seen me do, it you cannot turn those at. It's just a complete just get it out.
You don't need to, but what I do, and that's when people are always like, "Oh, sell your prints or get your prints." Here's a little Detective Chimp.
Oh,
I did, but then I have to go back. I've got to do the backs. Like people don't understand. Like, I have to actually look. Here's Al Jolson. I keep meaning to paint him.
Oh wow.
But then I have to go back in, which I don't have time to do.
They want you to do the backs,
sculpt them, make them nice.
They want it in full 3D.
So anyway, I do 98% of my sculpting with the Apple Mouse.
Oh wow.
So I've got a tablet here, but I'm so much faster with the mouse after years. Because again, coming up in the 90s, you had to do all your Photoshop coloring with a mouse. You had to do all your drawing with a mouse. Like, I was really good at Illustrator. So all of them, because I've got 3D animators. They all just look at me in horror when I tell them I sculpt everything with a mouse.
That to me, even I just do production, and I'm just like, wait, what? Huh?
Well, and I've got a CAD mouse here, and I can't get used to the middle button. The Apple mouse has basically a trackpad on top, so I can move my fingers very fast across the surface to swipe around and do stuff. But once you have that ingrained, it's so hard to retrain yourself.
Yeah. at the end of the day, it's like you just got to be comfortable, right? Like,
Right. Except I'm destroying my wrist. That's the worst part.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
Is
goes against the comfort.
because this is what's happening when you're doing sculpting with a mouse. So
Yeah.
Sculpted the whole arm.
yeah, I've gotta really. So, but again, I can move
Shoulder
super fast,
movements in
so
there.
I'm just dumb.
Ian, Monsters from Beyond, you nailed the look. Alex and you really do an amazing work at recreating a very specific style.
Well, so that's a great segue into my question, which is, so what is the secret to nailing that superpowers look? Like, can you articulate what it is?
So yes, there's a couple of things. It's weird, and I was my buddy who started collecting toys with me in college, and we were doing superpowers, collecting superpowers and everything. He's a huge DC Comics fan. I was the Marvel kid. He was DC. We would go to the comic shops. We would buy our books and then trade them, read each other's books right there, and then take our books home to read later. So everything I knew about DC was just quickly reading his copies of Crisis and stuff.
Right.
And then in the 90s,
secretly thinking that you were the superior fan, right?
Well, it's funny because we didn't like have a rivalry or anything. It was just I was very much into X-Men and Fantastic Four and Avengers and the whole Claremont Byrne stuff. And he was very much George Perez and Titans and all that. And then later I gravitated much more, especially in the 90s, to DC. And started seeing everything as the archetypes. I was always a huge fan of the Fleischer cartoons. I wanted to be an animator when I was growing up. I thought I wanted to be an animator. And I got a film degree and everything, and then realized not for me.
Yeah.
Real quick realized not for me. But I was telling him it feels bizarre in a certain extent that we started this thing as a goof in college, collecting toys. And he went on to be like a VP at Amazon and stuff, and like went into business, and he's, still likes this kind of stuff, but nothing like what I ended up doing. And I said, it feels so strange to be like one of the top people on earth for this toy line, like historian and expert in this toy line. It's weird that I've written all this stuff and I'm doing these covers for DC. Like I never would have predicted or even thought about any of this stuff. And doing all these sculpts, and that actually, and again, I didn't teach myself ZBrush until I was in my 50s, till COVID.
Right.
It's just something I always, even when I was a toy designer, I always just put it off, and I had access to all this stuff. Like, because again, at work, we had a 3D department. When I was doing Wendy's toys, we were just starting to get into 3D and like rapid prototyping where they were cutting it out of wax. Do you remember those?
Yep.
So it was like the subtractive process instead of the additive process. You give it a block of wax and it's removing all the wax. So all that kind of stuff. And then I ended up going in the ad industry, and I just didn't do it. Like I worked with all these great sculptors. So once I started teaching myself, and I immediately started sculpting action figures, of course, and superpowers. To get back to your question, I feel I studied these for so damn long. I've got like 30 years of really, really paying attention to what they were and researching them and talking to people and seeing, and the different Kenner styles. Like I can recognize all the different Kenner sculptor styles, which a lot of these guys, the Star Wars collectors, can do it too, the big guys. But it's that kind of thing of just noticing the details. Something we were talking about before. If you can, I'm really bad at noticing what people are wearing, what's different about their hair, what car they're driving. But if I zero in on something, I'm really good about noticing details that most people don't pay attention to. Right. And that helped me a lot working on Star Wars. It helped me a lot in toy development, because it's just something that's innate. It's not something someone taught me, and it's hard to teach. But I just notice a lot of stuff about why it is that way, how different muscles are sculpted, how they're hiding the mechanisms. so that was a big part of it. And then when I started sculpting these, I have a lot of beater superpowers, and I immediately went out and just primed all of them, and I've got them, and I took pictures from every angle, but I can look at these different bodies because everyone's like, Seeker Ores has like 3 main sculpts, right? And then they interchange a lot of pieces. So you get different combinations, but they're basically the same form factor. John Gardner, I think, did all the sculpts. And you can tell. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I started. I started doing all my Seeker Ores because that was so much easier than superpowers, because you can have one base body and just start resculpting it every time. Superpowers, there are no reused parts. There are no reused sculpts. If they look alike, it's because Kenner, I always say this, Mattel is a marketing company and Kenner was an engineering company. And so the engineers drove a lot of what they did. That's why they had all the mechanisms.
That makes a lot of sense.
100%. But you can see it in the sculpting is they very much came to this as, we don't know who these characters are and we don't care. We're just trying to make good representations of whatever we're assigned.
He needs to be able to shoot his arm out.
Yeah, and they have to elegantly hide all this stuff. And so you have a lot of different sculptors and superpowers, but they're all trying to hit this same style. Like that is the mask 100%.
Yeah.
Like you see it, Ghostbusters 100%.
Oh yeah, the fright feature stuff.
And it's even funny, like for the longest time, like everybody else, I thought Robin Hood was reusing superpowers pieces.
It's not.
It's not. It may reuse a couple of pieces, but they resculpted everything on top of superpowers, because what it looks like, I looked at, when I was doing research for my little Instagram series, you can see where Kenner got the license, and when the movie's coming out, they didn't have time to develop everything. So they basically said, give us waxes of all these figures and we'll sculpt the details into them really quickly and get immediately into tooling and reuse parts we can. Where they reuse stuff were the vehicles, the play sets. So those figures are already in scale with all of that. They don't have to engineer it. They don't have to think about it.
It's like the Ewok village is the Sherwood Forest. And
Bola Bomber, almost all of it's Ewok stuff, but some of it comes from Bone Age. I don't know if anything comes from Mask, but and then the figures, except for Friar Tuck, are all redone superpowers.
Friar Tuck being a Gamorrean guard from Star Wars. Correct?
But if you put them side by side, the details are all different. And as you know, that's retooling. Like
So they reused base sculpts, like wax sculpts, but it's all new tooling for
that's my thinking looking at it, detective work, is they had a very truncated time to get this line out. That was the easiest way to.
They were saving time, not money.
Right.
Basically.
And the Costner head gets a running change, but they don't worry about any other likenesses. They don't worry about any other costume details. Like nothing matches the movie at all. They just kind of did their own thing. The cards are all photo based, which Kenner was all about painted artwork. Even past that, and then all of a sudden they've got all these big photo cards. Well, outside of Star Wars, which Lucas probably insisted on that. That's probably just because they don't have time. Just give us some pictures from the set. We're gonna slap them on, and rush this line out. And I love the line too. I thought it was great. But they're retooling everything. They'd take just taking the knees out of the figures. And my buddy Danny Newman has a great article on Action Figure Insider that shows you where all the parts came from, and it's been up there for like a decade.
That's cool.
But the one thing they couldn't figure out was Azim's legs, where they came from, and they don't match anything. And so when I was sculpting these things, and I sculpted the missing 12 fourth wave superpowers figures, I think he has Silicon's legs. I think Azim, the sculptor who had done Silicon, already had that wax and just said, I'm just going to smooth out the details and cast these legs. But I'm almost positive that's where those came from.
Oh, that is wild.
That is some amazing forensic
Yeah.
toy
Deep
history.
dive.
Yeah. No, that is super cool.
Real quick, I want to
Yeah.
just quickly go back to, so because maybe people maybe missed this in the chat. When you say that you took some original Superpowers figures and primed them to sort of,
Yeah.
you mean spray paint them a gray flat color so you can
100%.
see better what the original sculpt looked like.
That's it. They will. This is not one. There's a 3D print, but they basically come out looking like a 3D print.
Mhm.
And
Spoilers.
if you give it a really nice, mid-tone gray, you don't want it too light, you don't want it too dark, it's going to catch the shadows and the highlights and really let you see, well, this is what they're doing. This is right here where all those details are coming from. And it's great because, again, I could put them all up in a line and see, this is what one person's arms look like. This is, and if you look at the McFarlane stuff, you can really see, here's the figures they based these pieces on. So I don't know if they did scans of one, because just one or two. Even those first lines, the first ones they did, I can look at the thighs and say, well, they're trying to do the Flash's legs. And I can look at these arms and say, that's a Superman arm,
Right.
It's very obvious once you know these parts, which is a smart way to do it.
Yeah. No, that is awesome.
So real quick, when you do your concept, a new superpower figure that's never been done before, do you sculpt the whole figure thinking of like a specific Kenner sculptor doing that character?
That's a good question. What I usually do, first I go and get a ton of reference. And I've got the Who's Who omnibus here, and I have the Unlimited app. So I will go through and just take a bunch of screenshots and look for a ton of reference I like of that version. I'm usually looking for an 80s version too. And again, if you go back to those covers, the first one, like Power Girl, it's very specifically the Atlantean version because that's what would have come out during Superpowers. DC didn't say that. That went a little back and forth. But again, and I write all the stuff on the backs. Like I do all that kind of stuff. So I'm just allowed to just kind of play with it. But so she's got the Atlantean symbol on her belt. She doesn't have the boob window.
It's that Justice League International era.
It's before that. So she had a limited series drawn by Carrie Gamble right after Crisis, because she was Superman's cousin. And then Crisis comes along and says, Superman's the only Kryptonian. And yeah, Allison. And again, I kind of did this for myself. And also I used to work with Carrie Gamble for a number of years. So I thought it was just a fun little Easter egg for him that I based it off his limited series. But yeah, that one felt like if she was going to be in Superpowers, that was the version. And we've seen the other version in figures a million times, and you haven't seen this. Right. And that's kind of the thing I also like to play with is, and I posted before, like I really was reticent to doing the gold Superman. McFarlane already was going to come out with their gold Superman. There's the one thing I already had sculpted. I didn't change my fan sculpt. But I sculpted the Superman Unchained Gladiator Superman from the War World issues. And I sent it to DC and I was like, I think we should do this one. They were like, maybe not.
I'm glad you got the gold one out though, because that's a big part of the history of that wave, right?
And it's like, so I do all those logos too. And if you ever wonder, like the McFarlane packaging, why sometimes they're using all these kind of crazy logos, DC only has a handful of them digital that are not modern. So they would give me like scan pages from Who's Who. And so I would just go into Illustrator and recreate the logos I want to use. Same for all like the chess symbols and emblems. I'm just making my 80s versions of those things. But like Green Lantern has the 80s Green Lantern book logo because that's the one I wanted to put on it.
Right. I love that logo too.
I pushed for him being John Stewart Mosaic at first, and they didn't want to do it. So I wanted that for the logo, and he had the Mosaic costume because I felt like the regular Green Lantern has had so many figures, and the Mosaic one hasn't. But
right,
yeah, so he had the high and tight haircut and everything, and we went for a small afro.
No, I like it though. It's great. Like these are great.
Yeah, it's all good.
When you first started posting these, especially because I want to just before we show the new covers, the way you do the, like you said, like the bubble and putting the lighting and rendering them. I remember when you first these were first posted, and I was like, oh my god, this is it. We're getting these. And then it was like, wait, these are covers. I totally got fooled. Because of the bubble. That's what threw me off. Because it's so well done.
If you look at my Instagram stuff, up until that point, what I did for a bubble is I took a photo like years and years and years ago. I took a photo of a bubble I just pulled off a reaction figure or something, and just literally put it on a green piece of poster board to act as a half-ass green screen. Lit it so it had some highlights, and just took a top-down 35mm photo. And then I went into Photoshop and just took the green out. And then I just had that as a layer that I just do. And it works, but it obviously doesn't, like, it's not talking with the figure well. Yeah. It's just two completely different lighting and everything. And so when they brought me this idea, that's what I originally was comping them up as for our internal things. And I just said, I've got to get out of my comfort zone and spend some time and figure out how to actually render this bubble with the figure. So if you look at those covers, the reflection of the figure is on it. The reflection of the book is on it. Like, it's picking up all that stuff. And I really play with the lighting, so the highlights are right and the shadows are right and nothing's competing.
But everyone's is different as well, which is another reason why it threw me off.
Like, because I'm rendering each one. So that bubble is not the same. It's a completely new render every time. And
it really creates the verisimilitude that convinces us it's real, that makes us want them to be real that much more.
Now, I'm trying to think of how much I want to say. The one thing that I could not do, because I know how to do it, but it's just so time consuming, is doing an inner bubble. But I'm working on something right now where I'm going to have to get out of my comfort zone again, I think. So that's all I'll say about that.
And maybe people may not necessarily realize, but like, so in the render program, you're lighting these, you're setting it. I assume it works like Blender. You light it. How many, what is that process like to get a nice, well lit? Because it's challenging to get like a nice, well lit.
And again, see, this is what's funny, because so just to dive into my background a little bit, I had a film degree, thought I wanted to make movies. Long funny story, Jim Cameron is the guy that talked me out of being a movie maker. That's a digression of all things.
Yeah, no kidding. Holy flex.
I guess he would know. I mean,
so and he thought he was encouraging me, but I just was like, oh, okay, this really is not hitting all the bells for me. And so it was scaring me more than making me jazzed. So I went another direction. But I learned how to do stuff like on Super 8 film and editing with a razor blade and doing reel-to-reel tape and radio spots and all that kind of stuff and using carts. So then I went into toy design and web design for about a decade. And then I went into the ad industry, and then they had me, they found out I had a film degree and had me develop the video department back when all that was catching fire in the late 2000s. But then I had to go back and teach myself all the digital tools. So it's that thing of like, I knew everything up here, but I couldn't do anything anymore. Like, I was totally not part of that digital revolution in terms of media.
Right.
So the same thing so then I built that up and I hired some great 3D guys. So 3D modelers, animators, worked with these all the time, did a lot of product stuff. And then when I jumped into it, I had them as a resource. So, but everything that I learned, and Alex, you might be the same way, watching you on Instagram and stuff, I only learned what I needed to know at that moment. Like, I'm not really a tutorial kind of guy. I'm kind of a jump into the program and mess with it. which
Yes.
ZBrush is the worst program to try that in.
Yes.
So,
Nothing makes sense at
No.
first.
I might know like 20% of the program. I have no idea, but I know how to do what
Yeah.
I need to know pretty
It-
good right now. Everything else I don't know. So same thing with modeling, or not modeling, but painting and rendering and putting all your lighting and stuff in. I understand how it works, but I know how to do it exactly for the things I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, if you guys haven't seen the Glowing Ghost channel,
Oh yeah.
his renders are unbelievable, and he does it in Blender too. He does a
Yeah.
combination of stuff.
They're amazing. It's funny because he reached out to me and was like, "What do you use to do your renders?" I'm like, "What do you use to do your renders? They're amazing!" Like,
Yeah. I'm just, every time I look at his stuff, and again, I look at your stuff. Your stuff, I always felt like, and Tom's, Zelu, who
Yeah.
also is
yeah.
Yep.
phenomenal. But I look at you guys coming up, and we all were pretty much doing kind of the same stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I would like say, oh, that's interesting how they're rendering, and that's interesting how they're rendering. And a lot of people were using Keyshot, and we played with that at work, and I didn't like it, but I really liked how Substance again felt kind of organic, and it felt more like you were taking a picture. But I think Blender has surpassed it, which is why I got to learn it. But then all of a sudden, your stuff just made this leap. Like you saw it, and I feel like same with the Glowing Ghost was just like, when I saw his stuff, I was like, how is this not real? How am I not looking at? Especially he's doing the packaging. He's doing the packaging, and he's doing it everything together, and I'm just like, how on earth is he doing that? Because I thought I was doing really good with mine. Now I feel bad.
Well, he uses Blender.
I know.
Maybe that's the.
I know.
secret.
So I've got to learn more about the lighting and all that, because I can light stuff. So yeah, my process is I put everything on the canvas. I literally just build it all on the canvas. I do each piece in Substance Painter, so I paint everything in there. I set it up. Here's the other thing people freak out about is I don't use polygroups at all. Like I find they slow me down to lay out my group. So really, just
in ZBrush, or
no, in ZBrush.
Really?
But it makes my painting that much harder because I just bring this whole model in, and then I just paint it all freehand.
But that's kind of more like the Kenner, like you're painting a Paint Master, right?
Yeah, and I used to do Paint Master, like physical Paint Masters back when I did toys and stuff. But now I'm old, my hands don't work and stuff, so doing eyes sucks. But yeah, anyway, I just build everything in there. I just bring it all into Stager. Stager's really cool because it's literally, its function is not really a renderer. Its function is for you to build artificial environments. So Stager is for, instead of doing a photo shoot, you bring a model into an environment and then you dress it and stuff. So it is for like this advertising world and that kind of stuff. But I use it just to do action figures. So
is that where you set up your lights as well, or
just fake stage? It's usually 2 to 3 lights.
Okay, cool.
2 super subtle. So I've just got one master environmental light. And I'll just play with the positioning, and it depends on the figure and everything, because I'm just trying to see where the shadows are landing. Like, I don't usually use any kind of colored bounce lights. I played with that a little bit. And then I just have like maybe one cool daylight temperature, regular light, and then I have a couple of warm lights that I'll just kick way back, like 10 or 20% brightness, and just move them around the bubble until I'm picking up edges. And if you look at some of the ones you might have, Ryan, the pictures I showed you, you can look at, so the stuff that's in previews is early pictures. And then I work on it before I have to turn in the mechanicals. So I have to get so this second batch, it's weird. The second batch is coming out. The first batch all came out together.
Yes.
So they told me about it. I had X amount of months to work on these, and I was shooting for one big date, and then they all showed up in previews within a couple of weeks, right? This new batch, they just 13th Dimension just put the schedule out. When they saw it as the first time, I'm seeing that schedule.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know when stuff is coming out. So they told me about this in like I think we started in October, and I needed to turn in the Constantine rough cover for previews because they have to solicit these, right? So I just need the fronts. And in fact, Alex Saviak was having knee surgery, so I inked the Constantine for the previews version.
Cool.
Which is crazy because that is not, again, I can do it. It's not my strong suit. So I was very happy when he sent me the final inks. And then he inked everything else. But they'll just suddenly say, oh, do you think by Monday we can get this? And I might not have even gotten close to, all the figures are done. I do all the figures first. But the cards, again, they're renders. Constantine originally was holding the little Swamp Thing tuber that's in the books. I don't know who's Swamp Thing fans, but it was like he was like a little potato for a while when some of that. So we just have different props. Amazingly, we have a pack of cigarettes in there.
Yes, I was about to bring that up. I was quite shocked that got through.
DC, and I think so. What at the very top? Can you see what age range that is? I think we upped the age
17 and up.
So yeah, because that was a Vertigo title. That age went up and Batgirl's age went down. So look at her feet. Do you see how the shadow or the highlight is covering her feet?
Yes.
And then look at Constantine. So the final render, same with Earth 2 Superman. Those are really quick lighting passes. So the final render, I'll really play with that because it's how much reflection it picks up. So it's trial. So I don't have a set lighting scheme. I just go in with kind of my basic light.
Okay.
And depending on the figure, trying to get those Superman chains translucent, a little bit translucent. It's just playing with the lighting till they look pretty good.
Gold Superman must have been a challenge, right?
It was, but I like metallics because they hide a lot.
Okay.
So if there's if you're just trying, you can't tell what's going on. So you just have to make it look cool. That's really it. You move it around so it looks kind of cool. And then I take them into Photoshop. So my last pass is I sweeten the colors because things kind of get desaturated when you're doing your render. And and again, you might have some things that that move, or because the whole card's in 3D, it might get skewed a little bit. It's really hard to get because it's a fake camera lens, in your render.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's putting a little bit of a warp, a little bit of fisheye on something that's flat. So I've got to go back in and correct that stuff. And I've got actions that kind of get me most of the way there, and then I'll tweak. So these are unbelievably work intense.
Not something to take for granted, when you see it looking so nice and pretty on the comic cover. It's like it's a lot of work.
Right. And this is a nice segue into stuff like, and this is what frustrates me with some other companies sometimes, is like if you look at those chest emblems on Superman and even on Batgirl, I made all those. And Ryan, I think I sent you a couple of like Neil Adams reference pieces.
Yes,
and the Wayne Boring Superman. So this is the stuff I sent Alex Saviak, and I told him I really want the Crisis Superman to be chunky, and I want him to have a receding hairline. So you look at Neil Adams, he loved this Superman S that has almost no yellow in it. Like it's a very thick, and if you look at
very cartoony.
It's not a diamond, it's very bowed out.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge because there was almost no front views of this in any of the comics I looked at. He's always at an angle. Right. He's always doing something super dynamic. So I had to just kind of extrapolate what I thought a perfect front view looked like in Illustrator to draw this logo. As an aside, this is always a fun story going back to just who notices details and stuff. When Gentle Giant was doing the big figures, Superman was the first one they did of the superpowers. And Daniel Pickett, my very good old-time buddy and co-creator of Action Figure Insider, he went to work for Gentle Giant, but he was working on them a lot. And Daniel knows everybody in the street, talks to everybody. I'm always the guy who doesn't want to leave his house. So, we were a good partnership. Because I don't want to talk, even though I talk a lot, obviously. I'm fine with hiding. But Daniel sent it on to me and said, hey, they're checking this, and I know you've got good eyes on this. Is there anything that's off about this? And I said that the chest symbol is completely off. Like it's like a lot of the McFarlane figures, they're just pulling it out of a style guide or something, and it doesn't look anything like the one Kenner used. And we don't know where that one came from. So I just drew them one really quick, just gave them a new emblem, and that's what's on the Gentle Giant. So I got to say, I did that one tiny piece of it.
Nice.
Super cool.
But yeah, so I'd send Alex all this reference, and when we go back and forth with Alex, my editor, we talk about all this kind of stuff. You know, I kind of tell him what I'm thinking of, because I wanted the head. Neil Adams draws things different all the time. His stuff is, because it's very dynamic, but it's not terribly consistent, especially over the years. So I wanted
yet you can always identify when it's him, right?
You can always identify it.
Yep.
So not so much the body. The body is basically a modified Kenner Superman on the Neil Adams one. If you go back to those covers, you can see him. But I wanted the two Superman to look very different, and I wanted it to look different than the Kenner and Gold Superman. So if you were doing this, if you were a toy designer back then, that's the thing. You wouldn't just do a repaint. You would sculpt it a little different. You would do something to differentiate it, so kids would buy two of these. Because who's going to buy another one of the same figure? So if you look, like even the where the torsos are, where the shorts are, the colors, obviously, the stance. I wanted the Earth 2 one to be just thicker and older. I tried to put a tiny bit of David Corn Sweat in the face. I don't know how much.
Oh, cool.
Successful.
Yeah. Ryan, can we zoom in on this at all, or do we have any?
That's right when I was working on this, I think, is when a lot of the photos started leaking and everything. And so it's just a touch, but I felt like, just to differentiate it, just give me a hook. And then the other one,
and that's that perfect Wayne Boring kind of wide torso.
That's and I think Ryan has some shots I sent, because that's what I sent, is just this Wayne Boring Superman, black and white Wayne Boring Superman. But you look at this head, this doesn't look like anything else Kenner did. And the final's going to look even better than this, because I cleaned it up. I tweaked it some more to after I let it sit for a while. And that's the great thing about these being print, is I can manipulate them however I want. Like, I don't have to worry about them being manufactured.
Right.
I'm trying to think what else on these. She's kind of Dakota Johnson in the face. I did.
Yeah.
Again, it just sometimes helps you to have an image to start with. So
Madam Web is Batgirl.
I know.
I don't know about that. Universes colliding.
And it wasn't even that intentional. I just needed kind of a face to start me off.
But
yeah,
do
you find that usually helps to get real life reference, even doing comic book characters?
It depends. Yeah, it does. It does. Like my Sergeant Rock 100% started out as my Arnold Schwarzenegger that I had already sculpted for Running Man, because he was going to be in the Sergeant Rock movie. And so I just kept that as kind of a guiding thing of, so sometimes I very much have actors or just a comic style. Like if it's someone like John Byrne, I'll really look at their artwork. So that's a good segue to Constantine. So Constantine was first. It was going to be Swamp Thing. And I had already sculpted a bunch of Swamp Things. And I was kind of like, let's do Constantine instead. Then it became very much a debate over because this is his first appearance. And in his first appearance, he's got like the full 3-piece suit. And he's got a black tie, and he's not as rumpled. And I was kind of like, here's the fine line. If we do his first appearance, it becomes like first appearance Batman. Right? That I'm working on. That it's
hold him up.
Hold him up again.
It's
too specific. Can you see this?
So good.
That's so good.
This is McFarlane Batman with a new head.
That cowl shape is just perfect. It's like the logo. Yeah.
Again, I don't want to get into McFarlane too much, but it's frustrating because it's just small tweaks to some of their stuff, and I think so many more people would be happy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, since we're talking about that, I'm going to segue again. So I need to finish this. Let me see if you can see that.
Cool.
Oh,
That's Flash. That's a McFarlane Flash. And I just printed a new belt, and I printed the little things on his arms, and they're glued on there, and then a brand new head, and it's articulated and everything.
that is so
Looks
good.
great.
Yeah, with a nice metallic black paint I found that caught all the like the lighting and everything to make it so you could see all his face planes. Okay, so I got totally sidetracked. What were we talking about? Oh, Constantine. So that was it. It was a little debate over if you do that first appearance and he immediately changes, and this is the Constantine everybody knows, it becomes much more for this tiny segment of fans. You know what I mean? Who want that look that most people don't remember that was his look. But
Right.
for the people who know John Constantine and how he started, the first appearances of him by John Toddleman and Stephen Bissett drawing, they based him on Sting.
Yeah.
They had been putting Sting in stuff, and they wanted this character to look like Sting. And down the road, even Sting got in on the joke and wrote a foreword for one of the compilations or books or something. But, you know, and over time, Constantine changed. But I very much was like, if we're doing a superpowers Constantine, he would have come out looking like Sting. And specifically like, you know, synchronicity Sting, like the whole thing. So
they could have reused the Dune action figure.
It's funny you say that. So Ryan, if you could bring up the comic, bring up. I sent you some comic shots of Constantine showing he looks like Sting. Do you see those?
Yes. It's my message in a bottle.
So this is, and I mean, that's obviously the picture they use. Like, it's not even like we're kind of using Sting. They put Sting in the comic. I think there's a second page where you can see they were really trying to, you know, just be fun with this. And at the time, I think they probably thought this was a one-shot character too. I don't think they foresaw this going on. But you see he's wearing like the three-piece black suit and everything with the trench coat.
Yeah, it's very Dick Tracy.
Very Private Eye.
Yeah. So if you pull up the other Constantine picture.
We're gonna okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that. Let's do it.
So the first thing I submitted, I sculpted Sting, and I specifically looked at the Dune figure and how they did that. And, you know, redid the features, got it a little closer on model, but based it on that, and I was all happy with myself. And you know, DC Legal saw it. So like,
what are you thinking?
You need to redo that head. So
this is great though. This looks so good.
I was very happy with myself for a while, but I thought it would be fun. Maybe I'll print one for myself.
Yeah. Oh man, you should make all the police. Just do it.
But yeah, well, this is what's funny is I've got I should have printed out to tease people. You know, I do my little series, like I've done my little horror reaction, and I've done the serial monsters and stuff. Those have been percolating in my head for like 20 years. I've got so many series written down of things I want to sculpt, and I've got a ton of superpowers no one's seen. Like at some point, I'll have the time to render these and color them and start up again, because I like to have a little backlog, and then it catches up to me, and I'm just trying to crank them out. But one of the series I had was musicians, and it was like different Beatles packs and Beastie Boys, which are, you can see the Sabotage figures behind me somewhere. But Super 7 basically cornered that, is I was going to do like, you know, 70s John Lennon and like all the ones you weren't expecting, but it was like Police pack was in there.
Great.
And it was like, a lot of stuff like Pat Benatar and you know,
another great one.
just different, and like Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly, and it was just going to be like these 30 figures from throughout rock. But I have stuff like I was going to do Willow series that were like Total Justice Extreme. Like a crazy 90s.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
I started that a little bit.
Kind of like Power of the Force Willow, right?
That's it. And I've got, a bunch of Raiders of the Lost Ark stuff, like the tote with the cyborg arm, the concept tote, and all of that kind of stuff. But then Hasbro started kind of remaking them, and you've got so many fans making third-party stuff. That's the big thing that happened, is I've been so slow with this stuff. When I was starting and Alex was starting this like 3 or 4 years ago, there's only a handful of us really doing this kind of fake toy thing to the level of them looking real.
Yeah.
And as you see with all of our output, we all got that, all led to us doing stuff.
Right.
So we're working on things behind the scenes and can't do as much, printing and Instagram stuff. And there's just this whole wave of people jumping in there and just going nuts with kind of stuff. And then you have like Super 7 that's just every now and then just cranks, stuff you would never think out.
Yeah. Right.
So like I had Dungeons and Dragons and all this stuff on my list, and I just said, at some point I'll get to some of them. I had like 60 sitcoms. So Gilligan's Island and Andy Griffith and Petticoat Junction and all of those I was just going to do.
Those would have been fun.
Yeah. Oh, and one I still may do, but like Readful Things pumps these out like crazy of the same kind of stuff that I was going to do. And it's just like, I don't want to step on anyone else's toes. Like just, if I don't have a reason, he's doing great stuff.
The days of taking food out of people's mouths is over.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the person, but like he's an amazing artist and painter, and his card art and everything is unbelievable. So like I'm good with the computer. Like I'm good with remixing things. My hand-drawn art is so abysmal, which is amazing because that's how I made my living for so long. But I can always get to that. I'm a much better art director than I am artist. I know I know how to get where we need to go. But yeah, my own stuff. And that's actually a good segue. We'll talk about the Daily Planet. So,
hang on, before we even get to that, because this all ties in. But because these covers, there's also a back of the card.
Oh yeah,
right.
This was mind blowing.
So it was, and you did post this. This is where I first like messaged you and went, "Oh my god, it was!" And I was like, Homer, I was doing like Trapopoline, like this was me because I was so excited, and we'll get in. Sorry, I just got to geek out for a hot minute, just because my dream was when they said, "Oh, we're bringing back superpowers," that we were gonna get that superpowers Harley Quinn, the Damian Wayne, the like just some of these modern characters done in that classic Kenner sculpt, just like like you were saying. And then I was like, oh, we could do vehicles, and we're talking about the Aero car, the JLA Survival Suit, which by the way, we'll show art about this, which has me just like, I want this toy. But this Daily Planet playset, holy shit. If Alex has to hear about me talk about a Daily Planet playset one more time, I even did like a quick like 3 squares and been like, this is my idea, Alex. Listen to this.
It was like the Charlie Day meme with the conspiracy board.
The board.
Like that was me, and I was like, this is what I'd want it to do. This is what I'd want it to look like. And then you pretty much took my idea and then kind of Ghostbuster firehoused it. Yeah. And I was like, this. Because you like I had the phone booth, I had the globe, I had the 3 stories, the entrance. I think the only thing I had on there was I added on more buildings to it to be like the fold out Kenner command, like Batcave command center. So it would have had like a bank for him to like stop break-ins and that kind of stuff.
So that's funny. Yeah. That's really funny you said that. So let me go back because I didn't finish one thing I was saying.
Okay, so sorry.
they told me about this in October, and these were going to be all facsimile editions. And this is again a little conjecture, but I guess the first cover sold really well, so sales now wanted to I guess push it and just see. Let's add these to variant covers where I don't think they've done variants to facsimiles before, or if they have, they were not like they're pushing out the variants for the other stuff.
Right.
And so they had already picked all the facsimiles, but these are being staggered out. Like the last one's coming out in September. And so they said, well, you only have one due by December, so we can solicit John Constantine in previews or whatever. And you only have to do the fronts. So you need to get all the figures sculpted, which I did in a few weeks. And then you don't have to worry about the packaging so much. Actually, I take it back. I had a couple of figures sculpted. And that was enough to get, and I did Constantine, we were going back and forth, and I'd worry about all this stuff in the new year. And then at some point it dawned on me, he said, you were going to have the solicits December, and then like early January, we'll need the mechanicals for Constantine. And it dawned on me, wait a minute, you need the mechanicals for Constantine. You're going to be showing the back of the card. I have to get everything sculpted in like a month and a half during the holidays. So yeah, I was not prepared for that. So yeah, this was a brutal assignment, because even though I have forever to work up the final mechanicals, I don't have to get all the backs done. I just had to get the one back done. So, it took me months to write all the copy. And in fact, I should be drawing the Manchester Black infographics. These take me a long time. When I draw those little infographics at the top with the hand.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to figure out all the functions. And again, everything I write on these cards, like they get spell checked, and every now and then DC will have me change some stuff, but they've never had me change like any of the drawings. They've never had me change the actions. It's all stuff like, can you put the issue of each, character underneath the figures so people know how to get these?
You're like a one-man Kenner.
Well, and that's the thing, is this is why it's so weird. And me doing the toys or doing Longbox, like on Longbox, I did everything. Like Bill does the licensing, and he's doing like all of the setting up all the what's the word I'm looking for? All the connections and the factories and running all that kind of stuff, right? All the administrative, getting everything together. And I did everything, the cards, the sculpting, of course, all the factory stuff, overseeing all the manufacturing stuff. And I think it's the only toy line, mass merchandise or manufactured toy line, that one person basically did the whole line by themselves. And it's 23 figures in one assortment. So that's incredible. A killer. and I only did it because, let me say, Bill kept saying we did get someone to do some of the paint masters, because it was just too much. It was too much work to do all this and do my job, because I have a full-time job at the same time, and I'm doing my idiot Instagram nonsense. But he would always say, let me hire somebody, because for Fresh Monkey Fiction, Bill runs all of that. Like everything you see are his designs, but I think he knew I just kind of wanted to do it and prove to myself that, hey, I want to do everything on this to see if I can do it. But also that's how you learn how to do this stuff. I had done each of those roles as just those roles before. So now on something like this, it's no big deal for me to be the one-man band. I can't do the Alex stuff though. That's going back to when we talked about it. They wanted me to draw the stuff, and they're like, you do that on Instagram. And I'm like, yeah, but if you look closely, my inking isn't that great. And I'm usually just redrawing a Garcia Lopez pose, which is what Kenner did. Like for all their concept art, it's just someone tracing over Garcia Lopez and adding new details. So I just kind of fake stuff, and that's good enough for Instagram. But I'm like, look, I just interviewed Alex Saviak for the Kirby thing. He was the other artist on Kenner stuff in the 80s. Surely if we can, if you can pay him, that's the best solution. Like, yeah, I will happily give up some money to get the guy who actually make these as official as possible. Which again is rare, is that I'm just stupid, but most people do. You don't hear I'm going to give up money and pay me less to do all this work. But
Right.
I am very much about the work. Like I care more about this being right than half-assing a bunch of this stuff.
And it totally shows.
It totally shows.
Well,
Well,
thank
this
you.
is great.
But yeah, so I had to, and the other thing was too is when they gave me the books and told me these were the characters. Again, Constantine was kind of, we decided on let's do him instead of Swamp Thing. I really pushed against Manchester Black, who I didn't even know who he was.
Oh,
But the big thing was I was like, because the first assortment, it was like, wow, these are all characters that don't have figures, you know, and it's such a wide range, and it's a bunch of Teen Titans, and everyone's gonna like this. And I saw these, and I was like, oh my god, everyone just complains that McFarlane just does Batman and Superman, and outside of
Oh.
one character, every one of these is from the Batman and Superman books, and we've got 2 Supermen. And another Batman and Robin, and I was just like, "Oh, people are just gonna be so mad if they see this."
Hey,
So
who do I have to message at DC to be like, hey, let them do a Zatanna?
So-
And Black Canary could use one too.
So here's the thing: I don't know if these are going to continue. It always depends on sales.
Right.
If these sell well, they like them. I like them. We have a good relationship. We would like to continue the relationship as far as it will go. But if they want to stick with facsimiles from now on, I mean, the sky is the limit. Like,
Well, they've been doing facsimiles for a long time, and I feel like the variants for facsimiles is something that's fairly new, because Marvel's doing them too.
Oh,
So
it
they're
100% is new. And
Yeah.
this is a fun. Here's a fun thing too. For the first covers, I've got the DC bullet on them. And that was because I had to do every cover front and back both ways with the modern DC logo and the DC bullet. And I just, and my editor Alex kept pushing too. We just kept pushing, let us use the DC bullet, because that's what, if we can't use the Kenner logo, that's what makes these 80s superpowers, you know, it's the closest
Yep.
thing. And
I
so
agree.
they finally relented, like it pretty much the 11th hour. Like it was very late in the process when they were like, oh, good news, we're going to go with the classic bullet. And then like a couple of months before they came out, or right after they came out, James Gunn comes in and changes the logo back. And so these are the first books that have the new logo.
Wow.
And that was just accident, complete happenstance. DC didn't know what was happening. So I was really happy with that when we
You had your
realized
finger on the pulse.
yeah.
Yeah, this is
But yeah, so if I sent you some other stuff, let's dive into the figures really quick. So I sent you some Batman pictures. One thing I will say,
Yes.
Alex, because I think both you and Tom worked on the Mondo Harley Quinn, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The whole time I was sculpting mine, your pictures were next to me.
Oh, cool.
Like literally
Pictures of me and Tom?
Yes, exactly. Glaring at me, telling me not to do a bad job. But I really, really, really I wanted to get that kind of, I wanted it to look like Kenner and superpowers to a certain extent, but I wanted it to just have a cute face and really look at what the problems you guys already solved. How you did the little ear things and
yeah, because it's like all with all Bruce Timm designs, right? It's like it's very particular. It's like and there's been a lot of different Harley Quinn versions, but to get that like animated series vibe, like it's
the one thing I liked about Kenner's 90s Tim stuff versus the Mattel stuff. The Mattel stuff is great, but the maquettes and the style guide poses, that very extreme where everybody's rigid and from the one angle, that's just to kind of give them what the style is. That doesn't translate in my mind to toys. And you have to find, and especially because the Tim stuff evolved in the first couple, like within episodes, they were finding their way to these designs.
Yeah.
And so you really want to look at kind of like year 2 or 3 of how they're netting out. And I always feel like your work just captures the essence of that. You can't look at it and say, oh, that's from this episode, or that's from the style guide.
Yeah.
You just look at it and say, that's from the show.
Well,
And-
I'm glad that because it's true. It's like it is kind of a tricky thing of finding that, like, what is that intersection
Yeah.
between all of the different artists trying to draw this character? Like, what is the like truest, I guess? Like,
Yeah. And that, so like I said, you guys had figured it out. So I just used, I literally didn't look at cartoon or anything. I looked at your figure for reference on her. That was it.
That's
when I was
awesome.
sculpting.
Yeah, it's so good.
Okay, so
But yeah,
Batman was a really interesting challenge because it's based on a comic. And at first, here's another thing. They wanted to do the Joker because he's in that one issue of the Jock book. So the cover has his face made of bats like flying away, if anyone can picture that.
Yeah, very
yes.
iconic. Yeah, it's like white background.
Yeah.
Black. Yeah.
Very iconic. So that's the issue. That's the facsimile issue. And he's in like just, I think, a black tuxedo, and Jock has a very specific, very rough style.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, man, that Joker, we already have a Joker in Superpowers. This would be different. But McFarlane's already kind of done the Batman Who Laughs, which is the white and black. And so I really was like, what else can we do? And they said, okay, you can do this Batman. And then I was kind of like, well, crap, this thing is hard. It is so hard to figure out what's happening in the details of that costume. And they did this DC Direct statue where, again, he's in a pose where I can't see how these things are laid out. And I'm not going to buy it, just to look at it. But I used all of these, and then I kind of fudged, and for the head, I leaned much more toward the Quietly head because this is Dick Grayson. And I was afraid if I did a sculpt of Jock's, you're going to think it's Bruce Wayne. And you'll see when you see the cover, Alex had originally done a sketch that felt very classic Batman. And I gave him all this Nightwing reference, and I said, make him an acrobat. Take that Batman and make him an acrobat, because I want it to feel like Dick Grayson in this costume, in both in the sculpt and this. I don't want it to look like the Batman figure. And so it's those ears that are kind of slightly on the outside of the head.
It's very Adam West.
Yeah. And these details are different than the Jock costume. It's the same kind of costume, but how they treat it and the things, some weird stuff going on with the boots.
Well, this costume, I'm pretty sure, was designed by Frank Quitely.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and there's all those Quitely-isms that I feel like also lend themselves well to Superpowers.
Oh, 100%. I think it was Jesse Falcon at one point was saying like Scott Collins was a great turnaround artist for Toy Biz, because he had this very, like Quitely, this very clean style where everything had very solid proportions. And so as a sculptor,
it's like,
it just feels like that can be an action figure already.
Quitely's stuff it's so sculptural. Like it is just, you understand what that sculpture looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. There's the Jock mask on the right. There's the Quitely on the left. And it's not it's not 100% Quitely, but I just kind of took that inspiration so it was recognizable as the Dick Grayson Batman.
Yeah.
Right. This is actually a great shot of both cowls, by the way.
Yeah. And you can see from the emblem, that's the same costume, and they're drawing those chest emblems completely different. So I just kind of made an idealized one when I did the one for me. And it's fun. Again, like I said, I make the logos at the top. You'll see I had to make logos for Batman and Robin because the book is Batman and Robin. So I had to kind of separate them out from their logos and make them standalones for the figures, which you'll see when those come out.
Man, that series though, that Frank Quitely series of Batman and Robin, so good.
So good.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
100%. And I think Damien was the last thing I sculpted because I was scared of it. And I ended up really liking it. And again, it's from a later, the costume is from later in the run, because the Quitely belt is like dark gray. And I wanted him to have a yellow belt. And I found one artist had done that later in that run, had switched the belt to yellow and changed a couple of the details. I was like, okay, that gives me permission to because again, at the end of the day, that's the thing is they're like, we're going to give you all these figures that are all in blacks and grays. Like if you look at that, I'm very much about, if you look at the stuff I do on Instagram, I'm constantly switching up the figures and wanting to do very colorful figures because that's Superpowers. Superpowers,
Right. It's 80s.
Crazy colorful as a toy line, which I love. And they gave me all these black and gray figures to do in this one assortment. So I was just like, where can I get splashes of color in these toys? And same with so Manchester Black, I really pushed his hair. That thing on his chest is a tattoo, which I didn't know. So he's not wearing a shirt.
Oh, really?
He's got a tattoo of the Union Jack on his chest.
Oh, actually, I didn't know. I knew that either.
Yeah, so
I know who Manchester Black is, but
his look changes from every single appearance, from the comics to the cartoons to everything. So that was something we went back and forth on because I kind of did an amalgam of I didn't use any one look. So that's just kind of that's one of the few things I got notes on where they were just like, keep making the trench coat puffier, like make it looser, make it look like it's, not more form fitting like a Clark Kent.
Right. Speaking of Clark Kent,
yes,
let's get into this.
Let's get into it. So again, I did these. I don't even tell them what I'm going to do. I just sculpt the stuff and say, this is what I'm putting on the back. And DC's always like, yeah, it's great. So it's amazing that I get away with this stuff.
And so, and you sculpted this playset.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
This is what I do. Well, I don't want to say during meetings at work. This is what I do during breaks during my day when I'm working. This is the level of the stuff when I was a toy designer, and even people I worked with would shake their heads half the time. But this is this is what I did for the play set, which is pretty much the final play set. Is I just sit there and just doodle and try to figure out. Once I thought I want to do the Daily Planet, I knew the telephone box. Oh, see, I had a newsstand down there, and I ended up pulling the hydrant and the telephone box from the Unproduced little quick change playset that Kenner did. So that's based exactly on that. And then I used that as the base. And I thought, well, what do we have to have in there? Because again, it's just an office building at a certain point. And if you think of the Daily Planet, it's just rows and rows and rows of tables with the fluorescent lights and all that. And that's not a very good playset.
You got to go like Death Star playset with this one.
So yeah. And if I was making this for real, it would be a lot taller, but I had to fit it in the box in the back of the package. So that really is why it only has 2 levels. But I thought I'd put a helipad up there. You can put the Batcopter on the top.
Smart. Very smart.
And I'm thinking this is Superman 78 Daily Planet, more or less, right? So it's got the helipad, so you can recreate the falling helicopter with the Batcopter. If you look at the side of it, I put a little kind of like elevator, like they would have those little outside elevators that you just move up and down with a peg.
Yeah,
see the little,
like the Death Star.
Except it's on the outside.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. And there's a button on top for the globe to break away. That I figured that out.
See,
gotta have it. Yeah. So how did you get a direct conduit into Ryan's dreams?
I don't know. It's just it's out there. I'm listening to the vibes. But you've got Perry White's office, so it's got the furniture, it's got the desk, it's got the water cooler, and then you've got WGBS Studio from the 70s, Morgan Edge, Clark Kent when he was a news anchor, with the fake stuff. And I put Lois in there, which they let me do. I already had Metallo done, so I just wanted a villain. But that's my Neil Adams Superman on the bottom. Just a scan of Clark Kent I colored real quick. And Lois was done really quick, but she's based on the style guide Garcia Lopez Lois.
Knew that right away.
Yeah,
even from I was like, that. Because even you watch this do the flip through.
Book review. Yeah.
So
and we were we're big stands of Lois Lane. So even just the idea of this figure getting made and seeing it so close to reality has me just like foaming.
I didn't have the space, but when I was designing the card, I actually had a little burst that said with exclusive Lois Lane figure. Daily Planet playset, but I said, I'll just be an Easter egg for someone looking at the details. And like the figures, the back isn't really done. So if you move across the images I sent you.
Yep. Oh, also on the inside, you can see a screen there.
So
also from the style guide.
Yeah.
There's a screen behind the desk, and it's got style guide art, so it's hard to see. It's like a flat screen behind the desk, but behind that, it's like the Death Star. It's got 2 cardboard inserts that just slide into the back that you can slide in and out for play.
So good.
Look like a 1960s office building. And then on the side, I didn't like it was open. So again, it would just be a cardboard. I found that billboard somewhere online. It's like, welcome to Metropolis or something like that. I don't know if that's in the Superman movie or not. But the bottom level would be a bank. So originally what I had on the side was the bank logo, because you mentioned that. That's what I was thinking, is you could have like bank robberies and stuff, and that could
break through have like a breakaway wall.
Exactly. So that's was going to be the bank on the bottom level. But I realized the angle I'm showing this, I didn't need to work all that out. So I ended up just covering that wall with a fake brick wall.
Yeah.
And you got the 4 brick. That took me a while to figure out how does this tower work as an office building if you don't have. It's kind of like what they did in the Death Star. Like the Death Star doesn't make any sense from the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
So I
think
ended up
you just
being
have fun. Just have fun with it.
Yeah, why not just make those like brick on the corners to hint at the exterior of the building?
Yeah.
And then Ryan, if you bring up the other Daily Planet shots I sent. So the base of this is based loosely on both the new James Gunn entrance to the Daily Planet and that's the James Gunn. So that's what it's going to look like going in there in Cleveland, I think. And this is from 78 Superman.
Yeah.
And if I was working out the bank and everything, I would have put the big globe in the lobby of the building. What's crazy is my company was in this building for about 13 years in New York. And every time I went to New York, I went in here and I had no idea until recently that they filmed Superman. I was watching Superman and I just suddenly was like, oh my God, I've been in that lobby a million times. But what they're in the street and the helicopter, that's the whole exterior of the Daily News building in New York. Like I immediately recognized it. But that was crazy.
There's just one thing with the playset at Ryan. I don't know if you can go back to that image. So I see that you're recreating those doors with that gold plastic.
Yeah.
But famously, doesn't that gold plastic break down and become very brittle?
Yeah, and it flakes off and everything.
So if this playset were made in the Superpowers era in the 80s, that thing would be disintegrated by
100%.
Yeah.
And I say to that, what Kenner designers probably said is not my problem.
I love it. The look is perfect. It's a perfect, like this solid gold, like. And
back then the toys weren't supposed to be around.
Yeah, it's true. Like, who knew? Who knew all this? But I also assume that the telephone booth has some sort of quick change mechanism. You can rotate them.
And I will say, like all that furniture I pulled off Cults, like I was working so fast on this stuff. I think that's like a Lego water cooler.
Dude, I love the water cooler.
Oh,
it's so good.
I love it too.
And I don't know if you ever do this, I just merge everything and just keep softening it over and over and over to get that kind of Kenner like toy look. So I'll get real items and just deform the crap out of them as one merged object, and then I go back in and put in where the hard edges were in the score lines.
Oh, cool.
Just to fake everything.
Right. It works.
I feel like that water cooler could be like turn it and like a trap door falls or some mech.
There would be more stuff going on here. Like this was Fortress of Solitude was all Photoshop in the first cards because I did that we'll talk about in a minute. Daniel Pickett, good friend, for his wedding present, he owns one of the proofs of the Dark Side Tower of Darkness labels. So he has had that framed. And as a surprise, his bride-to-be, I called her one day and said, hey, can you measure that and give me really good photos of everything? And I made him we had large format proof printers at work. And I actually pulled a real Kodak proof of the Fortress of Solitude that matched the size of his Dark Side Tower of Darkness. So that was my wedding gift to him. And then I posted it on Action Figure Insiders like an April Fool's, and it bounces around. And, people are always
I fall for it every year.
Yeah, like, this is a real thing. That was the only bad thing is it's really hard for people to even know where it came from, let alone attribute it to me, because we didn't even post it as me originally.
Secret is out now.
So yeah, so when I did that, I actually thought through that quite a bit, but it's all Photoshop mocked up. I bought a bunch of Imaginext play sets and took pictures of them and, just moved stuff around and recolored it. So this one I actually had to make. And then, yes, thank you. I was going to say, Davey talking about Lois's go-go boots. That's
I was just going to highlight that.
Yeah, that's straight from Garcia Lopez. And I didn't give you a photo of Lois because I don't like her face. I knew it was going to be so small. I didn't sweat trying to get her. Lois, it's just like in the movie. Zooming. Yeah, Lois is really tough to nail down, and I'm sure that's why they have trouble casting her. Is she, like a lot of these characters, you get this idea in your head of this is what they look like, but I feel like Lois as a concept is very malleable. What she looks like and how she acts and everything is it's I think that's the actor has to bring that to the role, and then you start associating them with that.
Yeah,
that's totally true.
Okay, let's move on to Aerocar.
Yep, let's do
that. Now we're going into from playsets to vehicles.
Yeah, and it's that's the thing. It's like they didn't tell me anything. It's just kind of I'm just going off the one playset to two vehicles.
Is this your first vehicle that you've sculpted or modeled?
No, the first cards I did the Fist of Fate, which again I named. That thing doesn't have a name.
Wow.
Fist of Fate and the Cyborg Crawler are off the concept art. There is a lot of debate over that's probably Red Tornado's vehicle if it got made because of what it does, and it's got some of the arrows on it. But it's blue and yellow, and it was going to come out second series, and I just feel like Dr. Fate doesn't have a vehicle, and Fist of Fate sounds so good, I just call it the Fist of Fate. But I made up a name. And they let me get away with that. So for this one, there's not a lot of vehicles left in the concept art that I did the first time. I just cherry picked the best ones.
Right.
And we have a million bat things from McFarlane. I will say McFarlane knocks it out of the park on the vehicles. 100%. Yep. I am just could not imagine. I'm just still amazed we're getting so many and they're getting all these done. So I started looking at DC, who has a vehicle, what's out there, and the Aerocar shows up a bunch, and it's different in like every appearance. Like the Golden Age one has this weird cylinder kind of a thing with wheels and everything. So when I was flipping through stuff, I found this one issue from the 90s. I don't think it's Phil Hester, but it's during that Phil Hester Green Arrow run. And I looked at that and I immediately said, that's supposed to be a Tucker torpedo. Like with those three headlights and the shape of those fenders and everything. I've got a picture at the top of the prototype for the Tucker convertible. That was so specific. And anyone if you guys don't know the story about the Tucker, it's a guy who tried to take on Detroit's big three automakers, and they crushed him. So he only made 50 torpedoes, and most of them are still around. Nice. Because the people have kept them and take care of them. But he had to make 50 to prove it wasn't a scam, because they were trying to say he was trying to scam people and take all their money. So he got the factory to make 50, and he won the court case. They took him to court, but it was too late. He couldn't get the court case dragged on so long. He lost all the money into funding, and they had to shut the factory down. It was kind of a Pyrrhic victory.
So they won at the end.
They won. They won and it was a success. It had so much like modern safety features and all of these things that the big three didn't. They were afraid that he was going to come in like Tesla and disrupt the industry. So they crushed him. But it's a very distinctive car. So I saw that and I just said immediately, I've got to make a toy version of the Tucker Torpedo, which is what I did. And I added the arrow to the front because I felt that was a very Kenner thing. Put stickers all over it.
Well, and not only that, but the arrow to the front complete, and now the back fin really feels like the was it flock?
Flechette?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it's like an arrow.
Yeah.
And that's his arrow symbol on the back, and it's a one-seater because I figured it would be a small vehicle. Like I played with all the stuff where I covered the wheels, so the wheels would just be spring-loaded like the land speeder, and it wouldn't have to be, the full thing, and it's all like a one-piece body. So that was fun. It was fun. The other vehicles were very much like I'm trying to realize that concept art. And I'm bad at modeling, 3D modeling. I'm good at organic sculpting, bad at 3D modeling. So I had to force myself to do it for the first vehicles to learn a bunch of stuff. And this one was kind of modeling it, and then, like I said, merging everything and softening it and making it feel more like an organically sculpted vehicle.
It looks, I mean, it just perfectly captures the like Kenner vehicle. Like, if I didn't know any better, I would say this was like a custom made from like one of the Shadow movie vehicles. Like, it just exactly evokes that.
Thanks, and that's
era.
And again, if I had more time, I would have put action features on it. Like I would have figured out, pop apart fenders or hood pops up something. But I just
the little front bit on the grill that needs to flip forward, and an arrow has to shoot out of it.
I did make the arrow a separate piece, so that could be like
cool.
Button. So you could push it, and whatever happens, maybe the headlights all launch. Maybe those are all the Kenner love projectiles.
It's like a boxing glove comes out.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been cool too.
So that was this was the one, and it's funny because I did feel like the Aero car. I don't know if this is going to be exciting enough, but once I hit that Tucker, I was like, well, I kind of got to do this for me.
See, usually I would give people shit for not making it a 2-seater. But this works. I think this
because we don't have a Speedy. If it was Batman and Robin, got to be a 2-seater. So I did feel like toy line wise, this is a good, and you got to think when they make these toy lines, they're looking at here's this price point, here's this price point, and here's this price point. So you want kind of these, this is almost a mid-range, but Daily Planet's going to be the big price point, and then a Batmobile or a Batcopter is going to be the higher price point. And then we can go to the third one, which someone had I think on 13 Dimension was asking why Aquaman is in the JLA survival suit, because he can survive depths, and it's this. I always saw this as a spacesuit, not like a diving suit.
Right.
So this is the concept art. Again, I think this was going to be wave 2, not wave 3, because of you can tell by what is in the border and stuff of the concept art when it was done.
Oh,
because each wave, each year, they were doing something different. Some of them had logos, some of them had like the gray lines behind them, but you can kind of get a feel of which waves they were supposed to be part of. This has Batman in it, and of all the figures,
I love that he's just like,
yeah,
my little suit.
like this could be a bat suit, but it would be not these colors, and it would have bat themed stuff because every bat thing has the scalloped edges for the
yep,
so,
or at least like fins with the
yeah, and it's called JLA Survival Suit. It's not Bat Suit, which is what that would be. So I just felt like Batman was absolutely not the choice. Why in the world Hawkman's just flying around is bizarre, but sure.
Well, to show that this thing flies too.
Yeah, I mean and that's actually a wonderful point, Ryan.
I thought it had fire legs.
Yeah.
It is a weird thing though, and I can see why it didn't get made, because the kid has to just be holding it the whole time. Like it doesn't even easily land like a Batcopter. But
It's got a 360 hip rotation, though.
yeah, I liked it. I thought this was goofy, a kind of robot thing. So
Yep, I dig it too.
yeah,
I like that it implies the arms just kind of swivel like this.
and I did cheat. One thing I really, really, really dislike about digital sculpting in the modern age, especially when people, it's one thing for like G.I. Joes and Marvel Legends. I hate that everything is symmetrical. Like that is the default, is everybody does this. And when that's fine. For 6-inch figures, especially, and you're reusing parts and everything has a very standardized look. But when you get to say like Star Wars, which are supposed to be real people, or especially all of these retro lines, nothing was symmetrical. Even if superpowers, they're trying to make the limbs look alike, they're sculpting them by hand out of wax. They don't. So it's a great, I don't want to say shortcut, but it's a great step for blocking everything out. I use Symmetry, of course. But then I go back and I tweak. I don't just sculpt new details on it. I mean, I like repose legs and feet and mess with it so it just does not feel like everything is the same.
Same. Yeah, because even when you look at this, like just right here in the center, I don't think you can see my
yeah, I can see it.
So right here in the center, you can see this one is a little higher than this one.
Yeah.
So you can see that this one's just a little off. Like just it's not symmetrical, lined up perfectly, you know.
It's called a ruler, people.
Yeah. So I brought that up because this is the one sculpt that the pincher arms I just flipped. So these are completely different. If you actually look at them, the details are fairly different. They're similar, but they're different. And that's probably just the artist not even paying attention to what he was drawing. I don't think he was like, I've got to make these different. And again, Kenner was an engineering thing. They would have given this to the sculptors and the engineering, and they wouldn't have, that would be like a launching pad for them. They would have done their own thing. That's why the sculpts don't look like a lot of the concept art. But this one I was just running out of time, so I just kind of flipped it. But yeah, so Aquaman is in this suit, because if this was in space, Aquaman's a character that would need to be wearing the suit. But the bigger reason is again, my buddy Daniel Pickett owns that concept art of the survival suit, and he's an Aquaman focused collector. He has just a collection of every Aquaman thing. So this was literally a specific Easter egg for one person.
I love that.
Nice. Yeah.
I love that. I want this as well. Let's face it. I want all of this. These are so much fun.
I wish somehow this stuff could get made, and and I told my story on Instagram. I talked to McFarlane for a very short period of time.
Yep.
About working with them. Like nothing came of it. It was no big deal. But that said, if they ever did have the budget or the superpowers go somewhere else, they could have any of my sculpts. Just pay me for the sculpts. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. Like, if you want to make anything I've ever done, just ask. I will give you a huge discount. The work is already done.
Well, I'm going to clip this and I'm going to send it to some people.
Yeah.
And because I agree with you. I would love nothing more than to see, like, I've talked about it ad nauseum on many different channels of how special your work has been.
Thanks.
Yeah.
No, like it really has been, because how many of us, you've even seen it here probably multiple times in the chat. God, I wish I could have this. Man, I wish this was real. Right. And even when you do, like, I know McFarlane did a Flesher style Superman. They should have not released that after you put yours up, because then the comparisons hit and you're just like, it's not like, again, the McFarlane guys, they're all great guys.
Mine is just a new head on a McFarlane body. Like that's what I'm saying is it's frustrating because I can only imagine what you go through at Mondo to get to that final part. And I feel like McFarlane and some of these other companies, they're very much like, this is the bottom line. So we're going to go from step 1 to step 8. And we just need to pump stuff out as much as we can pump stuff out. And I don't want to speak to their process, and I want to speak to I think all the talent is there. It's just very frustrating that there are steps missing, and I don't have it here. It is the craziest thing. So when I did the cards, I pulled proofs of my own. Like, I went through 20 or 30 of these trying to get the color right. It's really hard because if anyone knows anything about printing, if you look at the style guide, they call out process colors. So they're using spot colors for the blue, and I think either the red or the yellow. So when you have a spot color, you're using the Pantone colors or the CMYK colors, and the spot colors are a special mix. So like Coke's got its own red. Bank of America has its own red. So you've got to you mix that spot color, and that's an extra color that you can't make by doing CMYK, right? It's more vibrant. It's going to have whatever in it. That's what the blue and superpowers is this process cyan. So if you do a CMYK, you can only approximate it kind of. And so that was something when I did the covers, I just had to keep experimenting with these CMYK mixes until I got one that was pretty close. And it's not exact if you hold it up against the 80s packaging, but it's kind of close. And same with the yellows and stuff. And I even tweaked them. Once I saw how they actually printed, when I went for this next round, I tweaked a couple of the colors to get it closer on the second round. You look at McFarlane's cards for the figures, they don't have the right Superpowers logo on there. It drives me insane.
Yeah,
the vehicles have the correct logo. And the figure cards don't. They don't have, like, almost every element on that card is not built right. And it is, as a designer, it is infuriating because you do something wrong up front, you pay for that mistake for the life of the line.
Right.
And, and if you actually pull up that picture of Cyclotron, again, here was something else that was a big head scratcher at first. And this is actually what led to me putting the price sticker on there. They got my logo on there. Just a little fun inside baseball. So if you look at this picture, this is the comic next to an actual card. They're completely different dimensions.
Right.
And so the comic is taller and thinner than the Kenner card. So you have a lot more. So you don't have as much width to play with. And you've got too much at the top and bottom. And I didn't want it to look like there was all this floating stuff. So the price sticker let me kind of move things around where they felt like they're in the right place.
Right.
But not have all this white space up at the top to feel empty.
That's brilliant.
That is some solid graphic designer know-how right there.
And that's why I have the legal lines spread out at the bottom. It's just these kind of things to fill the space, and definitely with the characters, I had to play with that because I don't want the figures to be too different than the size of the figures on the original packaging. And I don't want suddenly the logo to be bigger. So there's all sorts of little things that I really played
all very
with
subtle,
until it felt like, glancing at this, it just felt like the comic. And I feel like looking at, and this is not just McFarlane, there's other packaging companies and stuff, but you look at their card and it just feels like everything is unanchored and floating on it. And of course, they're just using whatever artwork they get from DC. I'm working with DC and we made up all the artwork. Like that's the reality of licensing. And again, with Mondo, you guys are a design company. So you have access to all of the Mondo posters and all of this stuff and great designers, but working with some of these, you see it with Star Wars too. It's like you're at the mercy of what are we going to do? I'll tell you one more story because everyone likes hearing stories. Did I tell you the Robin story at Wendy's?
No.
So I'd written an action figure art insider article about it a long time ago. So some people have probably heard this. So I did I worked on a set of Teen Titans toys for Wendy's 2004-ish. Teen Titans Go.
Yeah.
I think it had just come out. And so Bandai had the license for the toys, and Bandai did something really weird. We don't know if it was on purpose or whatever, but because Mattel was making DC toys, it was between Mattel and Hasbro, but one of the big ones was making DC. So the license for Bandai was for a specific scale, and they didn't sign the license for the scale. They signed it for this height. I have a feeling this is what Spin Masters did too. So then all the figures are the same height. So Robin and Cyborg are the same height because that's what the license specified is everything's 3 inches.
Gosh.
And if you say it's 3 inches scale, then you can get away with a big figure, a small figure, and whatever.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So the whole line, everything's the same size. So one figure, I tried to get a Cyborg in there that was to scale with the line that people would get and then could just put it on their shelf.
Yeah.
And he had a little action feature. He punched when you pushed the button on his back. And he was on a base. You could pop him off the base, but if he was on a base, it's a kid toy, a figurine, but it's not an action figure. That was how we were trying to get around the license.
Right.
And
a true collector doing a service to his community.
I've tried to do this so many times. And the thing is, the people who work at these companies don't care about the licensing. They don't care about the property. They don't care about the toy, because a lot of times it's just a stepping stone to a different marketing job. And they're just trying not to get in trouble. So their watchword for everything is, I don't want to get in trouble. Like, I don't want anything that takes a risk. So if I don't feel good about it, and for that is they looked at it and they're like, well, I know who Robin is, so let's do Robin for all the toys, and we don't want this Cyborg character because I don't know what that is. So he got killed just because they didn't know who he was, even though he's one of the main characters.
Oh man!
But
and this was at Wendy's. You said
it was Wendy's.
It was a Wendy's premium line that would have, if you had your way, it would have given people the perfect Cyborg to fit with their Bandai Teen Titans
collection.
Oh man!
Wow. A good scale, and he would have looked good on shelf. Wouldn't quite have been an action figure, but close.
Yeah.
And on model. But we did, one of the toys was a Robin spinner. So it was the Teen Titans Go logo, had a magnet in it, and Robin was kicking, and he was on a little base, and you push the magnet toward him, and he spun real fast because he has a magnet. So fun toy. We did a lot of those kind of things. We get the DC style guide, and for at least, I don't know if it's still like that, but at least a period of time, whoever was putting together the style guides for licensing didn't know anything about like the show. Like, they weren't working on the show, and they weren't working on the toys. It was someone in marketing at WB, and they weren't great to work with either. But for some reason, when they're looking at these kind of Bruce Timm, that kind of animated look, you have, when you're pulling color chips, right, for the Pantone colors and everything for the style guide, you've got a base color and you've got a shadow color and whatever. They were using the shadow color for the base color. And this is Justice League and everything. If you think of those Mattel figures, they were always, the colors were weird and off. That was why, is because that shadow color is what they thought of the base color, and the rest was a highlight. And it was flipped. But you couldn't tell them that. They didn't listen to it. So we got back our Robin, and on the kids' toys, you have very limited paint ops. So you've got like 4 colors. So we already had to drop like the yellow off his cape, or the black off his cape. So it's just a yellow cape, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the highlights on his boots, whatever the secondary color was. So you had to simplify the color scheme. But he came back looking sunburned. Like, his face was like this red because that was the shadow color. His yellows were too dark and his reds were too dark. And I just argued and argued and argued. This doesn't look right. And they're like, it's approved and it's in the style. It matches the style guide. So after really fighting with them, they came back. WB came back and said, you can change one color, which is the stupidest thing in the world. We're not in production yet. Why not just say, if you're letting me make a change, let me change them all?
Yeah.
So I think we just changed his skin color. So his reds and his yellows are still too dark, but at least he didn't look sunburned. And somewhere I used to have a prototype of Sunburned Robin.
That is frustrating.
Nice.
Yeah. It is really, but that's licensing. And like, Lucasfilm was incredibly hard to work with during that time period. WB was bad. I'm trying to think who else was also just really like Marvel wasn't. Marvel that was when Marvel was in flux. So they were just they were hard to work with. It was just because nobody knew who was working on what and if they were bankrupt or they have a licensing department at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, WB was just I just dreaded it.
Oh, that's brutal.
And I guess yeah, I mean that's something to say for the sort of the fact that the adult collector market is rising. It's like that's become such a focus that people make more of an effort to understand, like, okay, I get why this is important, why it matters, who we're the people that we are selling to will notice that this is what they care about, like, as a much harder when you're just thinking about, like, this is just this is like for parents buying for their kids' friend's birthday, like, right, like it's been like a slow journey to get here, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because another one of my buddies, and you guys I think know him, Matt Koffenberg,
yes,
he does a lot of Wendy stuff, and he designed all the little like
Keshi style
hang on,
it came out last year,
yeah,
which were amazing. Like that is
so
just
good.
worlds different than what we could do back then, and they are, because now they're it's everything. It's social media, but they're very cognizant now that it's not just kids 4 to 6 or whatever the age target was.
Yeah.
But also you just toy companies back then. I used to have this debate with people, is the 90s were really strange because it was kind of like what was happening with Image and everything, is all the toys that we grew up on and loved, the people didn't have any affinity for the properties. It wasn't kids coming in. And if you're lucky, it was someone like Mark Boudreau, who was young enough when they got Star Wars to be enthusiastic. Everybody else is in their 30s and 40s, and it's just a job. It is, they're looking at the reference, they're making their things, they want to make, they're really good craftsmen. So they're trying really hard to make a solid product.
Yeah.
But they're coming at it from a fairly agnostic viewpoint of, I don't care what this is, I'm trying to make a good toy.
Yeah.
Right. And then you got all these people in the industry who were fans coming in, but didn't come from that craftsmanship background. So they became, I always said there were toy guys and comic guys in the industry in the 90s. And the toy guys were all about the engineering and all about the mechanisms and all about, the
play factor. Right? Yeah.
And then the comic guys coming in might be like Jesse Falcon or whatever, who came out of this comic background, and they were all about, well, I'm treating each sculptor like comics treat their superstar artists. So I don't care if this guy and this guy's stuff look the same. I don't care if the X-Men have a coherent style. I want all of them to be dynamic as hell. I want them, all the monsters, to be crazy and big hands and crazy legs and feet. And like, it's just, there's no coherency to it at all. But if you're a kid and you're doing this, you're like, these are just like McFarlane did the same thing. He's coming out with these Spawn things, and he would just push his guys, like, don't tell me what toys are like.
Yeah.
At the time, I'm going to tell you what I want, and you find a way to get it done. And I'm going to keep rejecting it till you get there. And that pushed the whole industry. And then suddenly you have DC Direct and you have all this stuff, and you're catering to much more a different audience.
Yeah.
A
little more sophisticated in some ways, but also like there's some expectations now. Well, and it's an older crowd.
And this is interesting because, like, comics then, after getting past the Jim Lees and McFarlanes and Liefelds and everything, they got the third wave, who become much more classically trained. And you see these amazing draftsmanship. You see the artists that are coming out, where you see like a Frank Miller, who was just incredible in his power, but as a draftsman and as an artist, like, his anatomy is wonky and everything's really rough and it's all for effect. You see like a Chris Samney or someone who's doing that kind of thing, but the anatomy is spot on. The lighting is spot on. Like he really understands what he's doing. You're seeing the same thing in sculptors. You're seeing like a Paul Harding come in who really is doing these amazing translations. Like when he does an artist style, he nails it. But he's also doing like the the Marvel Legends, the G.I. Joes, where the anatomy is all perfect. It's no longer like Tim Bruckner was an early kind of thing like that, who's saying, I'm not doing a Toy Biz kind of sculpt. I'm doing human proportions.
Yeah.
But everything he did had that very classic looking. It looked like classical sculpture. So it didn't always mesh with the toyetic-ness of it.
Right.
Right.
Sense. Yeah. The DC Direct, or they were statues that they cut up to have some movement.
100%. And that's why Bruckner was so good on Alex Ross. Because Alex Ross doesn't necessarily translate to toys, but he made it work because his style was more suited to that anyway.
Right.
But then you've got kind of the best of all worlds, digital sculpting and everything. Let guys like Paul really, really, really do some solid, nice work. You know, it's not can be in the toy, or like Joe Mena is another one who's just incredibly talented. And the stuff they're doing, but you can look at it and say, oh, those are human proportions. You know?
If nothing else, you can see everything much bigger. You can zoom in as much as you need to.
Got the detail and got the anatomy and, you know, all of that. Or you look at what Hot Toys is doing or any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then you've got a jackass like me who's just pushing shit around until it looks like something from the 1980s.
Hey, it works. You're doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if people in the chat, if you're watching this and you're not following Toy Otter on Instagram, do it now. Follow him at Toy Otter, right?
This will bring me to the last of the plugs because we are at our 1 hour mark.
Oh wow! I never realized
yeah,
Central Time Zone. I don't know about where you guys are.
Oh well, I'm you're East Coast, and we're hitting all the time zones. Let's put it that way. But no, thank you for being here. Like, this has been awesome. We've got Toy Otter's Instagram linked down below in the description. So if you're not following him, follow him now. As well, down there is the link to mondoshop.com. Alex, do you want to give a quick shout out to what's for sale?
Yeah, we got our Adventure Time squads out. If you don't know, squads is our line. Like, we did a Daria squad that you can see right above me here. We did an Real Monsters squad, which you can see just below that. They're sort of like, it's like I love it. It's like it's one of my favorite like new collectible ideas. It's basically like a maquette with interchangeable parts, so you can get like, you know, the poses and stuff from the show. And we call it squads because it's like you get sort of a core group of characters in the box, all one. So it's sort of like your collection is already complete, because it's like, if I just want the core cast, here it is. And so we have that for Adventure Time, and it's Finn and Jake and BMO. And that's up on Mondo Shop right now, sculpted by Brandon Gash. Amazingly talented sculptor. He did the Real Monsters as well. And they've got they have like swappable arms, right? So like some of those arms are like bendy wire, so you can get their kind of like noodle arm poses and stuff, and all the different faces and expressions are awesome. If you or anyone you know is an Adventure Time fan, check them out. I think the exclusive set is already sold out. But the regular edition, which has Finn and Jake and a ton of other fun stuff, is still available. So check it out.
And Egon and Boogeyman are still on sale as well.
Yes, Egon and Boogeyman, the whole, you know, for this month, the chunk of this month, they're available. But after that, you won't be able to get Boogeyman. So, you know, if you want Boogeyman for your Ghostbuster collection, mondoshop.com right now.
And Evelyn?
And Evelyn is still going, but and that pre-order window ends very soon. So yeah, if you've been sitting on the fence about Evelyn, do not delay. Go now.
Well, see, you're gonna do the commercial next year for me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I gotta,
come on down.
I gotta jump in real quick. That Boogeyman hair is insane.
It's
I don't know
very
how you're
hard.
manufacturing that.
Very hard. It's yeah, I mean it's been a process, but yeah, we you know, first of all, it's so many pieces. Like I kind of talked about this on the Toy Talk, but like just cutting it up into this insane 3D puzzle where all those, because you can't mold something like that in one
Right.
go, right? So I cut up a bunch of pieces, then the factory did even more, and we've worked out, you know, because you have to get the weight right and the balance, because his head, he's mostly head, right? So like you can't be too top heavy. So like we've been trying out different materials and getting that balance just right. So he, you know, it's been a process is all I could say, but you know, well worth it, I think. So.
Yeah, that is, I could not believe you guys were making that.
It's so cool. Do you got TMNT?
TMNT. Oh well, just yeah, our TMNT soft vinyl is.
Oh, okay.
Up.
Just didn't want us to forget it, but they're still up. And then
available.
As well, down below is the link to Alice's comic. That's still going, so please go check that out as well. Again, I keep saying this every week. Just try to get her back next week. I'm probably going to see her tomorrow at work, but I'll talk to her then. And yeah, and then you'll see me on Tuesday on Toy Anxiety. So again, thank you so much, Jason, for being here.
Yes,
hanging out. We usually try to stick it close to an hour. We went way over.
Yeah,
but
no, it's hard to get me to talk. I know it's
no, this is great. I'm like I said, super thankful. I learned so much new shit today, and I am so grateful. This has been an absolute blast. So we're gonna have we'll have you on again if you'll let us.
It feels like it's just been the tip of the iceberg. So
yeah, I got a lot of stories, man. I'm an old guy.
Yeah, well, but we're grateful for your wisdom. Yeah. So with that said, thank you everyone. Have a great night, and we will see you next week.